When two little girls screamed for their lives in a rain-soaked parking lot, dozens of people heard them. Dozens of people saw the guns, saw the kidnappers dragging them toward a black van destined for a nightmare beyond borders. And dozens of people did absolutely nothing. Except one man, a man the world had already thrown away, a homeless veteran accused of crimes he never committed, a father torn from his own child. He had nothing left to lose. So he stood up anyway. And what happened next changed everything. Before we dive into this incredible true story, I want to ask you something. Stay with me until the very end, because what happens will restore your faith in humanity. And please, comment below with your city or country so I can see how far this story travels. Now, let's begin. The November rain fell like judgment over the city, cold, relentless, indifferent to the souls it soaked. Under the concrete overpass of Interstate 94, where the roar of traffic overhead drowned out the sound of human desperation, Elias Ward pressed his back against the graffiti-stained wall and pulled his threadbare military jacket tighter around his shoulders. It wasn't much. The jacket had seen better days, most of the insignia torn off, the fabric worn thin at the elbows, a cigarette burn near the left breast pocket from a campfire 3 winters ago. But it was all he had left from his time in the service. 8 years of his life, 2 tours overseas, commendations for valor that now sat in a storage unit he could no longer afford to access, gathering dust alongside photographs of a life that felt like it belonged to someone else. "Daddy's coming home soon, buddy, I promise." The memory of his own voice echoed in his mind, the last thing he'd said to his son Mason before everything fell apart, before the accusations, before the trial, before the world decided Elias Ward was guilty of crimes that had been invented by men more corrupt than anything he'd faced in combat. That was 14 months ago. 14 months since he'd held his 6-year-old boy. 14 months since he'd heard Mason's laugh or felt those small arms wrap around his neck. 14 months of living under bridges and in shelters, of searching dumpsters for food, of watching his reflection in storefront windows transform from soldier to something society crossed the street to avoid. Elias adjusted the cardboard sheet he'd wedged between his body and the concrete to block the wind. Beside him, his backpack contained everything he owned: a change of clothes, a water bottle with a crack in it, 3 protein bars he'd gotten from a shelter, the birthday card Mason had made him 2 years ago with a stick figure drawing of them playing catch, and a flip phone with 17% battery that he kept turned off to conserve power. The rain intensified, drumming harder against the overpass above. Elias watched the water stream down in sheets just beyond his shelter, creating a curtain between him and the parking lot across the street. The parking lot belonged to a closed-down shopping center, another casualty of the economic downturn. At this hour, past 11 at night, it should have been completely abandoned. But something felt wrong. Elias couldn't have explained it if someone asked. Maybe it was his combat training, the hypervigilance that never fully left even after you took off the uniform. Maybe it was the instinct that had kept him alive when IEDs tore through convoys and bullets split the desert air. Or maybe it was just the desperate awareness that came from living on the streets, where danger could materialize without warning. He shifted, peering through the rain at the parking lot. 3 vehicles sat in the far corner, their headlights off. A black van, the kind with no rear windows, the kind that could have belonged to a contractor or a kidnapper. A dark sedan, and an SUV with tinted windows. Elias's jaw tightened. Vehicles didn't just park in abandoned lots after midnight unless someone wanted to conduct business they didn't want witnessed. "Not your problem," he muttered to himself. "Stay down. Stay invisible." That was the first rule of homelessness. Don't get involved. Don't draw attention. Don't give anyone a reason to remember your face or call the cops. Survive by staying out of everyone's way. Elias pulled his knees to his chest and closed his eyes. Then he heard the scream. Not just any scream, the kind that cut through rain and thunder and the white noise of traffic overhead. The kind that turned blood cold. The kind that could only come from someone experiencing pure, primal terror. A child's scream. Elias's eyes snapped open. Through the rain curtain, he saw movement in the parking lot, figures struggling, the van's side door sliding open. And then, unmistakably, impossibly, 2 small girls, couldn't have been more than 7 or 8 years old, fighting against 2 large men who were dragging them toward the van. "No, please, somebody help us!" The girl's voice shattered through the storm. Elias was on his feet before conscious thought caught up with instinct. He stepped out from under the overpass, rain immediately soaking through his jacket. His boots, held together with duct tape, splashed through puddles as he moved closer, his eyes adjusting to the darkness broken only by distant streetlights. The scene crystallized with horrifying clarity. Two identical girls, twins with long, dark hair plastered to their faces by rain, wearing matching pink jackets now torn and muddy. They were fighting with everything they had, their small fists pounding uselessly against their captors. One of the men had a girl under each arm like bags of garbage. The other man stood by the van door, and even from 50 yards away, Elias could see the shape of a gun in his hand. Around the parking lot's perimeter, Elias spotted them. Witnesses. At least a dozen people, some standing in doorways of the closed shops, others in their cars, having pulled over when they heard the screams. He could see the glow of cell phones, people recording, people calling 911, people bearing witness. But no one moving, no one running to help, no one willing to put themselves between those children and whatever nightmare waited inside that van. "Please," one of the girls screamed again. "Please, somebody help!" Elias felt something ancient and primal ignite in his chest. Not courage. Courage implied a choice. This was something deeper, something carved into his DNA during those 8 years in uniform, during every moment he'd stood between innocent people and those who would harm them. He started running. His boots pounded against the wet asphalt. The rain lashed his face. Every instinct from his training activated: threat assessment, tactical approach, identifying cover positions. The man with the gun was the primary target, approximately 6'2", 220 pounds, positioned 7 feet from the van's open door. The man holding the girls was closer to 6 feet even, focused entirely on controlling his struggling captives. 50 yards became 40, became 30. "Hey!" Elias's voice boomed across the parking lot, amplified by years of shouting orders over helicopter rotors and gunfire. The man with the gun spun toward him. For a split second their eyes met through the rain, then everything went to hell. "We got a witness!" the gunman shouted. "Put them in the van! Now!" The man holding the girls moved faster, practically throwing them toward the open door. One of the twins, she had a small birthmark visible on her left cheek even through the rain and darkness, managed to twist free. She hit the ground hard, her palms scraping across wet concrete. "Laurel!" the other girl screamed from inside the van. Laurel scrambled to her feet and ran, not away from her captors, toward her sister. The gunman grabbed her, his hand fisting in her jacket. She screamed and kicked and clawed at his arms with a ferocity that would have made Elias proud if his heart wasn't breaking at the sight of such terror on a child's face. 20 yards. The gunman raised his weapon. "Stay back! I will shoot you! I will shoot this kid!" The barrel pressed against Laurel's head. Elias didn't slow down, didn't stop, didn't even flinch, because he'd seen this play before. He'd seen hostage situations in Kabul and Kandahar. He'd seen men use children as human shields, and he'd learned something crucial. Men who make threats are buying time. Men who actually intend to shoot don't announce it first. This asshole was stalling 10 yards. "I'm warning you!" 5 yards. Elias launched himself forward in a full combat tackle. He slammed into the gunman's center mass, his shoulder driving into the man's solar plexus with the full force of 200 pounds of desperation and rage. The gun discharged, a deafening crack that split the air, but the bullet went wild, sparking off the pavement 6 feet to the left. They hit the ground in a tangle of limbs. The gunman was bigger, but Elias had training and something far more dangerous. A man with nothing to lose fights different. He fights like every second might be his last. He fights without hesitation, without mercy, without the self-preservation instinct that makes most people hold back. Elias drove his elbow into the man's throat, grabbed the wrist holding the gun, and slammed it against the concrete once, twice, 3 times until the weapon clattered away. "Laurel, run!" Elias roared. The little girl didn't hesitate. She sprinted away from the van, her small form disappearing into the rain-soaked darkness. The second kidnapper, the one who'd thrown the other twin into the van, came at Elias from behind. Elias sensed rather than saw the attack, rolling away just as a boot came down where his head had been a heartbeat before. He swept his leg out, catching the man behind the knees, sending him crashing down. But the first gunman had recovered. He lunged for the loose weapon. Elias was faster. His hand closed on the grip. He came up in a crouch, weapon raised, and for one crystalline moment, everything froze. The gunman on the ground. The second kidnapper climbing to his feet. The van door still open, with one twin trapped inside and another hiding somewhere in the darkness. Distant sirens beginning to wail. And Elias Ward, homeless veteran, accused felon, forgotten father, holding a gun and trying to decide if he was about to become a killer. "Don't," Elias said quietly. "Don't make me." The first gunman's eyes flickered to something behind Elias. Elias started to turn. Pain exploded through his left shoulder. The crack of gunfire registered a split second after the bullet tore through muscle and bone. Elias staggered, his vision whiting out. A third man. There had been a third man in the SUV that he hadn't accounted for. He heard the little girl scream, the one still in the van, heard the engine roar to life, heard tires squeal as someone shouted, "Go! Go! Go!" Elias raised the gun in his right hand, his left arm hanging useless and streaming blood. He aimed at the van's rear tire. He could stop them. He could still stop them, but his vision blurred. The van accelerated, fishtailing through a puddle, and then it was gone, disappearing around a corner with one twin still trapped inside. Laurel appeared from behind a dumpster. Her face was a mask of rain and tears and absolute terror. "Lucy!" she screamed toward where the van had disappeared. "Lucy!" Elias dropped to his knees. The gun fell from his grip. Blood poured from his shoulder, mixing with rainwater, swirling into the storm drains. "It's okay," he tried to say to the little girl, but his mouth wouldn't form the words properly. You're safe. Police are..." The sirens were louder now, very close. Flashing red and blue lights painted the parking lot in strobing colors. Laurel ran to him. This tiny girl who just watched her twin sister get kidnapped ran straight to the homeless man bleeding out on the asphalt and threw her arms around his neck. "Thank you," she sobbed into his shoulder, the one that wasn't destroyed. "Thank you, thank you, thank you. Please don't die, please." Elias wrapped his good arm around her. Her body shook with sobs. She was so small, the same age as Mason. How had the world become a place where children this young knew this kind of fear? "I got you," he whispered, each word costing him. "I got you. You're safe." Police cars screeched to a halt around them. Doors slammed. Officers shouted commands. Someone was yelling at Elias to put his hands up, to get away from the girl. Laurel screamed, "No! He saved me! Don't hurt him!" Then paramedics were there. Someone was pressing gauze to his shoulder. Someone else was trying to pry Laurel away from him, but she clung tighter, refusing to let go. "Sir, we need to treat you. Sir, can you hear me?" Elias's vision tunneled. The world became distant, like watching through the wrong end of a telescope. The last thing he saw before consciousness fled was Laurel's face, tear-streaked and terrified, as they finally pulled her away. The last thing he heard was her screaming his name, except she didn't know his name, so she just screamed, "Please, please don't let him die." Then darkness. Thus, Chapter 2. Waking up in a different world. Elias woke to pain, not the sharp, immediate agony of being shot, that had dulled into a deep, throbbing ache that radiated from his left shoulder through his entire arm. This was the pain of healing, of his body trying to repair damage it shouldn't have sustained in the first place. He opened his eyes slowly, expecting to find himself in a county hospital ward or maybe even a jail cell. The cops had seen him with a gun. They'd seen blood on his hands. Would they believe he was the victim and not the perpetrator? Did the truth even matter when you looked like he did? Homeless, desperate, dangerous? But the ceiling above him wasn't water-stained institutional tile. It was pristine white, smooth, professional. And instead of fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, soft LED panels provided a warm, gentle illumination that didn't hurt his eyes. Elias turned his head, carefully, testing whether his neck still worked, and took in his surroundings. He was in a private hospital room. Not a ward, not a curtained-off section of an emergency department. A private room with oak wood accents, a flat-screen television on the wall, a cushioned chair positioned by the window, and French doors that opened onto what looked like a small balcony. This was the kind of room people with excellent insurance, or more money than God, recovered in. Elias looked down at himself. His left arm was in a professional sling, bandaged and immobilized. He wore a clean hospital gown. Someone had bathed him. The dirt that had become part of his skin over 14 months of homelessness was gone. His beard had been trimmed. His hair was clean. What the hell? Oh, thank God. You're awake. Elias's head snapped toward the door, too fast, sending a spike of pain through his shoulder that made him gasp. A woman stood in the doorway. Mid-30s, maybe. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail that had started to come loose. She wore designer clothes, but they were rumpled, like she'd been wearing them for 2 days straight. Her eyes were red-rimmed, exhausted. But when she looked at Elias, something in her expression was so intense it almost hurt to witness. Relief, gratitude, desperation. Who are you? Elias managed. The woman stepped into the room, and Elias noticed 2 things. She moved with the confident authority of someone used to being in charge, and she'd been crying recently. The evidence was written in the slight puffiness around her eyes, the way she kept blinking like she was still fighting tears. My name is Victoria Hale, she said. Her voice was controlled but trembling at the edges. And you saved my daughter's life. Memory crashed over Elias like a wave. The rain, the screaming, 2 little girls, twins. One had gotten away, but the other... Lucy, he said. They took Lucy. Victoria's face crumpled for just a second before she wrestled her composure back. Yes, they took Lucy, but we got her back. You what? Victoria moved to the chair beside his bed and sat down, perching on the edge like she might need to bolt at any second. 6 hours after the kidnapping, police tracked down the van. They arrested the men. Lucy is home safe. Victoria's voice broke. She's traumatized. She won't leave her sister's side. She has nightmares, but she's alive. And that's because of you. Elias closed his eyes. Thank God. Thank God. Thank God. Thank God. The other girl, he said. Laurel. Is she... She's okay. She keeps asking about you. Victoria's voice went soft. She told me what you did. She told me you got shot protecting her. She told me you held her while you were bleeding and promised her she was safe. Do you know what that means to me? Do you have any idea? Elias opened his eyes and looked at this woman, this mother who'd just gotten her children back from the edge of a nightmare, and saw echoes of his own desperation. The kind you only understand when someone threatens your child, when your entire world hinges on one small person's safety. I'm a father, Elias said quietly. I have a son, Mason. He's 7. If someone... He had to stop, swallow past the thickness in his throat. If someone hurt him, I'd want to believe that somewhere in this world there'd be one person who'd give a damn, even if everyone else just stood there and watched. Victoria stared at him. You have a son. Had, Elias corrected bitterly. Past tense. I haven't seen him in 14 months. His mother made sure of that. Why? And there it was. The question that had defined his entire existence for over a year. Why? Why him? Why had his life imploded? Why had everything he'd built collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane? Because powerful men needed someone to blame, Elias said. And I was convenient. Victoria leaned forward. Tell me. Ma'am, with all due respect, I don't even know why I'm in a room like this instead of a county ward. I'm homeless. I don't have insurance. I can't pay for any of this. Panic started to creep into his voice. I shouldn't be here. They're going to realize I can't pay, and I'm paying for it. Victoria's tone left no room for argument. Every cent. You saved my daughter. This is the absolute minimum I can do. Now please, tell me what happened to you. Elias looked at her carefully. This wasn't just curiosity. Something else was happening behind her eyes. An evaluation. Like she was gathering information for a purpose he couldn't quite identify yet. So he told her. Not everything. The full story would take hours. But the essential tragedy. How he'd been a sergeant in the army. How he'd served with distinction. How he'd come home to his wife, Sarah, and baby Mason thinking the hard part was over. how he'd started working as a contractor for a defense logistics company, and how Captain Marcus Webb, his commanding officer from his second tour, had approached him about joining a side project, freelance security work. Good money. Completely legitimate, Webb had assured him. Elias had said no. He had a family now. He wanted to leave that life behind. That's when everything started to unravel. Evidence started appearing, Elias said, his voice flat now, reciting facts like a news anchor. Documents with my signature approving the shipment of stolen military equipment. Bank accounts in my name receiving payments. Testimony from other soldiers, men I'd served with, claiming I'd recruited them into the theft ring. But you didn't, Victoria said. It wasn't a question. No, ma'am. I didn't. Marcus Webb did. He was running the entire operation. But when federal investigators started closing in, he needed a fall guy. He had the connections, the influence, the ability to make documents appear, to make people lie, to make the truth whatever he wanted it to be. Your wife believed them? Elias's laugh was hollow. Sarah started sleeping with Webb 6 months before any of this went public. I found out during the trial. She lied on the stand, said she'd seen me with stolen equipment, said I'd told her about the money, said she was scared of me. Jesus Christ. The judge, federal judge Raymond Hartford, accepted every piece of fraudulent evidence, threw out anything my public defender tried to present. When I was convicted, Hartford gave me 8 years, said I was a disgrace to the uniform, a traitor, said men like me deserved to rot. And your son. This was the part that broke Elias every single time. His voice dropped to barely a whisper. Sarah got full custody, filed a restraining order, claimed I was violent, dangerous, a threat. I appealed, tried everything. But with a felony conviction and a restraining order, I had no chance. Then I lost my job, lost my apartment, couldn't afford a lawyer. And by the time I'd exhausted every legal option, he gestured around the hospital room with his good hand. This became my life, living under bridges, eating from dumpsters, trying to save enough money from panhandling to make one phone call a month to hear my son's voice for 5 minutes. Victoria's expression had transformed during his story. The exhaustion was still there, but now it was joined by something Elias recognized from mirrors. Rage. The cold, focused kind. The kind that wasn't hot anger, but rather a decision made in steel. Marcus Webb, she said. Judge Hartford, your ex-wife. They're still out there, living their lives, unpunished. Yes, ma'am. That's not justice. No, ma'am, it's not. But I stopped believing in justice about 13 months ago. Victoria stood up and walked to the window. The morning sun was breaking through clouds, painting the city in gold. When she turned back to Elias, her expression had shifted into something he couldn't quite read. Determination, calculation, purpose. Mr. Ward, Elias, I need to tell you something about the kidnapping, about why it happened, because this conversation isn't over, not by a long shot. She sat back down and folded her hands in her lap, and when she spoke, her voice carried the weight of someone about to share information that changed everything. I'm the CEO of Hale Defense Systems, Victoria began. We manufacture communication systems for the military, satellite technology, encrypted networks, tactical field equipment. Last year, my company was selected as a finalist for a $12 billion Department of Defense contract, the single largest telecommunications project in DoD history. Elias listened, his tactical mind already starting to piece together where this was going. There's one other company in the running, Victoria continued, Titan Strategic Solutions, run by a man named Marcus Webb. The name hit Elias like a second gunshot. Webb? He repeated, his voice strangled. Captain Marcus Webb? Victoria's eyes widened. You know him. He's the one, Elias said. He's the one who framed me. He's the reason I lost everything. The silence that fell between them was heavy with implications neither of them wanted to voice yet. Finally, Victoria spoke. The contract decision is scheduled for 3 weeks from now. Whoever wins essentially controls military communications infrastructure for the next decade. It's not just about money, it's about influence, power, access. And Webb is losing, Elias said, understanding crystallizing. His company has had issues, quality control problems, a scandal involving equipment failures in the field. Nothing that's killed the bid entirely, but enough to put them behind. 2 weeks ago, DoD officials indicated privately that my company is the likely winner. So Webb took your daughters. Not to ransom them, Victoria said, and now her voice shook with barely controlled fury. Not for money. The FBI briefed me after they arrested the kidnappers. Do you know what those men were paid to do? Elias didn't answer, didn't trust his voice. They were going to traffic Lucy and Laurel overseas, Victoria continued, each word precise and cutting. Sell them. They'd already lined up buyers. My daughters were going to be shipped to another country, and she stopped, unable to continue. Elias felt sick, actually physically nauseous in a way that had nothing to do with his injuries. The plan was simple, Victoria managed after a moment. Take my children. Make them disappear. Watch me fall apart on national television. Have the board question my stability, my ability to run the company. Force me to withdraw from the contract competition, or at minimum create enough chaos that DoD decides to go with the safer option, Webb's company. That son of a bitch, Elias breathed. The men who took my daughters? They're hired criminals. They'll spend the rest of their lives in prison, but they're not the real enemy. Webb is. And according to the FBI, proving he ordered the kidnapping is going to be nearly impossible. He used multiple cutouts, encrypted communications, offshore payments. By the time investigators untangle it all, if they ever do, the contract decision will be long past. She looked at Elias with an expression he was beginning to understand. You didn't just save Laurel that night, Victoria said quietly. You prevented my family's destruction. You stopped Marcus Webb from winning. And in doing so, you brought yourself back into this man's orbit. She paused. He's probably already found out who you are, already knows that the homeless veteran who ruined his kidnapping plan is the same soldier he framed years ago. Elias hadn't thought about that, about the fact that his name would have appeared in police reports, about Webb's vast resources and intelligence network discovering that Elias Ward, supposedly rotting in obscurity, had just become a hero splashed across local news. So what happens now? Elias asked. Victoria stood up again, and this time when she looked at him, there was no uncertainty in her expression, only resolve. Now, I make you an offer, and before you say anything, before you reject it out of pride or shock or disbelief, I want you to hear me completely. Okay? I have resources, Elias, money, lawyers, private investigators, forensic accountants. I have connections in the military, in Congress, in the Justice Department, and I have something else. I understand exactly how men like Webb operate, how they bury evidence, how they buy people, how they use the system as a weapon against the innocent. She moved closer to the bed. Give me 3 days, Victoria said. 3 days to dig into what Webb did to you, 3 days to find the truth he buried, and 3 days to get your life back. Elias stared at her. Ma'am, with respect, it's been over a year. Do you really think Webb got sloppy with the kidnapping? Victoria interrupted. He was desperate. He made mistakes, and desperate men who make mistakes tend to have made similar mistakes before. If there's evidence to find, my people will find it. She leaned down so they were eye level. Your son is 7 years old, Mason. He's growing up believing his father is a criminal, that his father abandoned him. Do you want him to grow up thinking that? Or do you want to fight? Of course I want to fight, Elias said, his voice breaking. I've never stopped fighting, but I have nothing left. No money, no credibility, no... You have me, Victoria said simply. And I don't lose. Not to men like Webb. Not ever. The room fell silent, except for the soft beep of medical equipment. Elias thought about Mason, about those phone calls where his son would cry and ask when Daddy was coming home, about the drawings Mason sent through Sarah's lawyer, pictures of them playing catch, going to the park, being a family. About the last thing Mason had said during their most recent call, his small voice breaking. I miss you, Daddy. Please come home. He looked up at Victoria Hale, this woman who had every reason to simply pay his medical bills and move on with her life, and saw something he hadn't seen in over a year. Hope. 3 days, Elias said. Victoria smiled, the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. 3 days. Rest now. Recover. And when I come back through that door, I'm bringing the truth with me. She walked toward the exit, then paused at the threshold. Elias? Yes, ma'am? Thank you, for my daughter, for not being like everyone else who just watched and did nothing. Thank you for proving that good men still exist. Then she was gone, and Elias was alone with his thoughts, and the morning sun streaming through the window of a room he couldn't afford, thinking about a promise from a stranger that might be the answer to 14 months of prayers. He closed his eyes and whispered to the silence, "Hold on, Mason. Daddy's not done fighting yet." 3 days felt like 3 years. Elias spent the first day drifting in and out of consciousness, his body demanding rest even as his mind raced with possibilities he didn't dare fully believe in. Nurses came and went, professional, kind, treating him like any other patient rather than the homeless man he'd been 72 hours ago. They changed his bandages, checked his vitals, brought him meals that were the best food he'd eaten since before his conviction. But it was the second day that changed everything. Elias was sitting up in bed, carefully testing his range of motion with his injured shoulder when the door opened. He expected Victoria. Instead, 2 small figures rushed into the room with the velocity of missiles. "It's him! It's him!" Laurel reached him first, stopping just short of the bed, her eyes wide and shining with tears. Lucy was right behind her, and Elias realized this was the first time he was seeing her, really seeing her, without rain and darkness obscuring her face. The twins were identical except for one detail. Lucy had a small scar near her right eyebrow, probably from some childhood accident, while Laurel had the birthmark he'd noticed during the kidnapping. "Hi," Elias said softly, unsure what else to say to 2 children who'd been through hell. "You saved me," Laurel whispered. "You got shot, and you still saved me." "And you stopped them long enough for the police to find me," Lucy added, her voice trembling. "The FBI lady said if you hadn't fought them, if they'd gotten away faster, they never would have caught them. I'd be... She couldn't finish. Didn't need to. Victoria appeared in the doorway, and when Elias met her eyes, he saw an apology there. "I told them they could come see you for just a minute. They've been asking nonstop since you woke up." "It's fine," Elias said. Then to the girls, "Are you 2 okay? Really okay?" Laurel climbed onto the chair beside his bed while Lucy stood nearby, twisting her hands together nervously. They looked so young, so fragile. The idea that anyone had tried to hurt them, to steal them, to sell them like property, made Elias's blood run cold all over again. "We have nightmares," Laurel admitted. "Lucy wakes up screaming sometimes, and I can't be alone. Even in the bathroom, Lucy has to sit outside the door." "But we're safe now," Lucy added quickly, "because of you. Mom says you're a hero." Elias shook his head. "I'm not a hero. I couldn't stand there and do nothing." "Everyone else did," Laurel said, and there was something ancient and sad in her young voice. "There were so many people. We could see them. We were screaming for help, and they all just watched." "I know, sweetheart," Elias said gently, "and I'm sorry. I'm sorry the world works that way sometimes. But you're safe now. That's what matters." Lucy moved closer, studying his face with an intensity that reminded him of how Mason used to look at him when trying to figure out if Daddy was telling the truth about monsters not being real. "Mom says you have a son," Lucy said. The words hit harder than the bullet had. Elias swallowed. "Yeah, his name is Mason. He's 7, about your age." "Where is he?" Such a simple question, such an impossibly complicated answer. "He's with his mom," Elias said carefully. "I haven't seen him in a while, but I'm working on that." Laurel's face crumpled with understanding beyond her years. "That's not fair. You saved us. You should get to see your little boy." "Life isn't always fair, sweetheart." "Mom's going to fix it," Lucy said with absolute confidence. "Mom fixes everything. She says she's going to help you get Mason back." Victoria stepped fully into the room. "Girls, we should let Mr. Ward rest." "Elias," he corrected. "Please. Just Elias." "Can we come visit again?" Laurel asked, reluctant to leave. "I'd like that." The twins hugged each other, That unconscious gesture of twins who'd always had each other and now clung even tighter after almost being separated forever and left with their mother. But at the door, Laurel turned back. "Thank you," she said again, "for not being scared, for running toward us instead of away." After they left, Elias sat in silence, staring at his hands. Those words echoed in his mind, running toward us instead of away. How many people had watched those girls being taken and chosen their own safety over two children's lives? How had the world become a place where that was the norm? He thought about Mason, about what he would want someone to do if his son was in danger. The answer was simple: everything. He'd want someone to do everything. Maybe that's all heroism really was, treating other people's children the way you'd pray someone would treat yours. The door opened again. This time it was Victoria, alone, carrying a leather briefcase that looked expensive enough to cost more than Elias's last car. "They love you already," Victoria said, settling into the chair Laurel had vacated. "Lucy asked if you could come to her birthday party next month." "That's very kind, but—" "I told her maybe," Victoria interrupted, "because what happens in the next few hours is going to determine a lot about where you'll be next month." She set the briefcase on the bed and clicked it open. "I have news. And Elias, I need you to brace yourself." His heart rate picked up. "Did you find something?" "We found everything." Victoria pulled out a tablet and turned it toward him. On the screen was a photograph of Marcus Webb, older now than Elias remembered, his hair graying at the temples, wearing an expensive suit and smiling at some corporate event. Seeing that face again after all this time sent a jolt of pure rage through Elias's system. "My team has been working around the clock," Victoria said, her voice taking on the crisp efficiency of a CEO delivering a briefing. "Forensic accountants, private investigators, former FBI agents I keep on retainer, and a few people with, let's call them specialized skills in digital recovery." She swiped to the next image, a spreadsheet showing financial transactions. "We started with Webb's current activities, the kidnapping attempt. Like I said before, he was sloppy. Desperate people make mistakes. We traced the payments to the kidnappers through 4 shell companies, 2 offshore accounts, and a cryptocurrency exchange. It took my team 48 hours to crack it, but we have a direct financial connection from Marcus Webb to the men who took my daughters." "That's good," Elias said. "That means the FBI can—" "It gets better," Victoria interrupted. "Because once we established his current pattern of criminal activity, we knew what to look for in his past. And Elias, your case? It's textbook. The same playbook, the same shell companies, just with different names, the same methods of evidence fabrication, even some of the same people." She swiped again. More documents, bank records, emails, personnel files. Captain Marcus Webb ran a military equipment theft ring for 3 years. We have the evidence, real evidence, not the manufactured garbage he used to frame you. He stole approximately $40 million worth of equipment and sold it on the black market. And when you refused to join his operation, when you became a liability who might eventually figure out what was happening, he decided to eliminate you. Elias's hands were shaking. "How did you find this? I had lawyers. They couldn't find anything." "You had a public defender handling 70 cases simultaneously," Victoria said gently. "You had no resources, no money, no access to the kind of investigators who can pull digital evidence from servers that were supposedly wiped clean." She leaned forward. "Webb thought he'd buried everything, but he didn't count on someone with unlimited resources and a personal vendetta deciding to dig." "What about Sarah?" The name tasted bitter. "My ex-wife. Her testimony was crucial to my conviction." Victoria's expression hardened. "Sarah Ward began an affair with Marcus Webb approximately 8 months before your arrest. We have hotel records, credit card receipts, text messages recovered from Webb's backup servers. He never permanently deleted anything, arrogant bastard. In the messages, he coaches her on exactly what to say in court. Promises her money, protection, a life together once you're out of the way." Elias closed his eyes. Hearing it confirmed, knowing for certain that the woman he'd loved, the mother of his child, had deliberately destroyed him, hurt worse than the gunshot. "There's more," Victoria continued. "Judge Raymond Hartford, the federal judge who presided over your case, he received $250,000 deposited into an account held in his nephew's name. The deposit came from one of Webb's shell companies 2 weeks before your trial began. We have the transfer records. We have emails between Hartford and Webb discussing ensuring the right outcome. Jesus Christ. The soldiers who testified against you? 4 of them received payments ranging from $50,000 to $100,000 each. 2 of them have since died, one from a drug overdose, one from a car accident that the police classified as suspicious but never solved. The other 2 are still alive, and my investigators have already made contact. One of them, Sergeant David Chen, agreed to talk. He's willing to testify that Webb threatened his family if he didn't lie under oath. Victoria set the tablet down and pulled out a thick folder. This is everything. Financial records, communications, witness statements, forensic analysis of the evidence used against you. It's airtight, Elias. Absolutely airtight. We have enough here to vacate your conviction, disbar the judge, and put Marcus Webb in federal prison for the rest of his natural life. Elias stared at the folder like it might evaporate if he blinked. I can't. There's one more thing, Victoria said softly. She pulled out her phone and played a video. On the screen, Mason appeared, his son, his beautiful boy, sitting in what looked like a school classroom. He'd grown. His face had lost some of its baby roundness. His voice was more confident, but his eyes still had that spark Elias remembered, that mix of mischief and sweetness that had always made being a father feel like the greatest privilege in the world. My dad is my hero, Mason said to whoever was holding the camera. Everyone says he did bad things, but I know he didn't. I know it. My dad would never hurt anybody. He was a soldier, and he protected people. That's what he does. He protects people. Mason's voice wavered, and he wiped at his eyes with the back of his hand. I miss him so much. I want him to come home. I drew him pictures and I write him letters, but Mom says I can't send them. She says he doesn't want to see me. But I don't believe that. I think something bad happened, and everyone's lying, and I want my dad back. The video ended. Elias realized he was crying, deep, wrenching sobs that tore from somewhere primal in his chest. All the grief he'd been carrying for 14 months, all the helplessness and rage and despair came pouring out. Victoria moved to the edge of the bed and took his good hand in both of hers. She didn't say anything, just held on while he fell apart. When Elias could finally breathe again, he looked up at her with red eyes. Where did you get that video? Mason's teacher recorded it for a class project about heroes. She posted it on a private school website 3 months ago. One of my investigators found it. Victoria's own eyes were wet. That little boy loves you, Elias. He's been waiting for you, and now we're going to make sure he doesn't have to wait anymore. What happens now? Now I introduce you to someone. Victoria pulled out her phone and made a call. Send them in. The door opened and a woman in her 50s entered, followed by a younger man carrying another briefcase. The woman wore a crisp suit and had the air of someone who spent her life in courtrooms. The man looked like he could have been military, crew cut, alert eyes, the kind of posture that suggested discipline and training. Elias Ward, Victoria said. Meet Jennifer Krause, one of the best criminal defense attorneys in the country, and Marcus Stone, former FBI and current head of my security division. Jennifer approached the bed and extended her hand. Elias shook it, still dazed. Mr. Ward, I've reviewed every document in your case, Jennifer said without preamble. This is the most egregious miscarriage of justice I've seen in 23 years of practice. We're going to file an emergency motion to vacate your conviction tomorrow morning. Given the evidence Mrs. Hale's team has assembled, I anticipate the conviction will be overturned within a week. A week? Elias repeated numbly. Possibly sooner. Judge Hartford is going to be arrested. The U.S. Marshals are preparing the warrant as we speak. The judge who takes over your case will be highly motivated to correct this injustice quickly and publicly. The optics of a federal judge taking bribes to wrongfully convict a decorated veteran are, let's say, career-defining for whoever fixes it. Marcus Stone stepped forward. Mr. Ward, I'll be coordinating security for you and your son once you're released. Marcus Webb is dangerous, and he's going to be desperate when he realizes what's happening. We're not taking any chances. My son, Elias said. Sarah. She has custody. How do we... Already handled, Jennifer interrupted. Your ex-wife's testimony was perjured, which means it's inadmissible. Her affair with Webb establishes a conspiracy. The restraining order was granted based on false testimony. We'll have it dissolved simultaneously with the conviction being vacated. And given Sarah's role in the conspiracy, she's going to be facing criminal charges herself. She'll be in no position to fight you for custody. Everything was moving so fast. 3 days ago, Elias had been sleeping under an overpass. Now he was being told his entire nightmare might be ending. I can't pay you, he said to Jennifer. Any of you. I don't have anything. You saved my daughters, Victoria said firmly. You took a bullet for my child. You think I care about money? She stood up, and there was steel in her voice now. Elias, you're going to get your life back, your name, your son, your future. And Marcus Webb is going to spend the rest of his miserable existence in a cell. That's not charity, that's justice. Finally. Elias looked around the room at these people, these strangers who'd become his advocates, his champions, his hope, and felt something he hadn't felt in over a year. He felt like maybe, just maybe, the universe wasn't entirely cruel. Thank you, he whispered. All of you, thank you. Jennifer smiled. Thank us by being ready to fight. Tomorrow morning we go to war. And Mr. Ward, we're going to win. The next 72 hours blurred together in a chaos of legal proceedings, police interviews, and media attention that Elias was completely unprepared for. Jennifer had been right. Once the evidence hit the federal court system, things moved with stunning speed. Judge Raymond Hartford was arrested in his chambers. The news footage showed him in handcuffs, his face pale and stricken, as U.S. Marshals led him out of the courthouse he'd presided over for 15 years. The charges, bribery, conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and violation of civil rights under color of law. His bail was set at $5 million. Sarah was arrested at her home. Elias watched the news coverage from his hospital room, his emotions a complicated tangle. Part of him felt vindicated. Part of him just felt sad for Mason, who would now have both parents caught up in legal nightmares. But it was Marcus Webb's arrest that made headlines nationally. The FBI raided Titan Strategic Solutions headquarters at dawn. They arrested Webb in front of his entire executive team. The evidence Victoria's team had assembled, combined with fresh evidence from the kidnapping investigation, was overwhelming. Webb was charged with organized crime, human trafficking conspiracy, attempted murder, fraud, and about 15 other federal crimes that carried sentences totaling several lifetimes. The defense contract was immediately suspended pending the criminal investigation. And through it all, Victoria stood beside Elias. Not physically, he was still recovering in the hospital, but in every way that mattered. Her lawyers became his lawyers. Her investigators shared every shred of evidence. Her public relations team crafted the narrative. Decorated veteran wrongfully convicted, homeless but heroic, now vindicated. On the 4th day after Victoria's promise, Elias stood in a federal courtroom for the first time since his conviction. He wore clothes Victoria had bought him, a simple suit, nothing flashy, but clean and dignified. His arm was still in a sling. Jennifer Krause stood beside him, radiating confidence. The new judge, a woman in her 60s named Margaret Chen, reviewed the motion with an expression of barely controlled outrage. Mr. Ward, she said finally, looking at him over her reading glasses. What was done to you is a stain on this institution and a betrayal of everything our justice system is supposed to represent. The evidence of your innocence is overwhelming. The conspiracy against you is documented beyond any reasonable doubt. She picked up her gavel. The conviction in United States v. Elias Ward is hereby vacated in its entirety. All associated penalties are nullified. Mr. Ward, you are a free man with a clean record. I am profoundly sorry for what you endured. The gavel fell. The sound echoed through the courtroom like thunder. Elias's knees nearly buckled. Jennifer grabbed his good arm to steady him. From the gallery, he heard someone crying, Victoria there with her daughters, witnessing justice finally prevail. But Judge Chen wasn't finished. Furthermore, I am ordering immediate dissolution of all restraining orders against Mr. Ward. Custody arrangements will be reviewed expeditiously given the criminal charges pending against Sarah Ward. Mr. Ward, you will have access to your son beginning today. This court recognizes the immense harm you have suffered and will do everything in its power to facilitate your reunion with your child. Jennifer leaned close to Elias. You did it, she whispered. You're free. The courtroom erupted in applause, from reporters, from Victoria and her daughters, from strangers who'd read his story and come to witness this moment. But Elias barely heard any of it. His mind was focused on one thing only: Mason. He was going to see Mason. After 14 months of separation, of phone calls that were never enough, of drawings and letters that never reached him, of nights spent wondering if his son would even remember him, he was going to hold his boy again. The reunion was arranged for that afternoon at a neutral location, a family services office with supervision just for this first meeting. Marcus Stone drove Elias there, with Victoria following in her own car for moral support. The whole way, Elias's heart hammered against his ribs. What if Mason was angry? What if he'd believed Sarah's lies? What if 14 months was too long and the connection between father and son had been severed? They arrived at a modest building in a quiet neighborhood. Inside, a social worker greeted them with a kind smile. Mr. Ward, your son is in the room down the hall. He's been waiting very patiently. She paused. He's very excited and nervous. This is a big moment for both of you. Elias nodded, not trusting his voice. Victoria touched his arm. I'll wait here. Go get your boy. Elias walked down the hallway on shaking legs. The door at the end was painted cheerful yellow. Through the small window he could see Mason sitting in a chair, swinging his legs, clutching a drawing in both hands. Elias opened the door. Mason's head snapped up. For one eternal second they stared at each other. Then Mason's face crumpled and he burst into tears. Daddy! He launched himself across the room. Elias dropped to his knees, ignoring the scream of pain from his injured shoulder, and caught his son in his arms. Mason crashed into him with the force of all the missed hugs, all the separation, all the loneliness compressed into one moment. Daddy, Daddy, Daddy! Mason sobbed against his neck. You came back. You came back. I knew you would. I knew you didn't leave me. I knew it. Never, Elias choked out, holding his son as tight as he dared. I never left you, buddy. Never. I was trying to get back to you every single day. Every single day. Mason pulled back just enough to look at his father's face, his small hands reaching up to touch Elias's cheeks, his nose, his hair, as if confirming he was real. You look different, Mason said through his tears. Your beard is shorter, and you're skinnier. Are you sick? No, buddy, I'm not sick. I'm perfect now, because I'm with you. Mason noticed the sling. You're hurt. What happened? I'll tell you all about it, but the important thing is I'm okay, and I'm never going to be away from you again. Never. Promise? I promise. Mason threw his arms around Elias's neck again and held on like he was afraid Elias might disappear if he let go. Elias held him back, breathing in the scent of his son's shampoo, feeling the solid warmth of his small body, trying to memorize every detail of this moment. I drew you pictures, Mason said eventually, pulling back and holding up the paper he'd been clutching. Every day. Mom said I couldn't send them, but I drew them anyway, because I knew you'd want to see them. The drawing showed two stick figures, one big, one small, playing catch in front of a house with a smiling sun overhead. At the top, in Mason's careful second-grade handwriting, me and Daddy when he comes home. Elias's vision blurred with fresh tears. It's perfect, buddy. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. The social worker poked her head in. I hate to interrupt, but there are some people here who'd like to meet Mason if that's okay. Elias looked at his son. There's a family I want you to meet. They're friends of mine, and they have 2 daughters about your age. Is that okay? Mason nodded, wiping his eyes. Okay, but you're not leaving? Not for a second. They walked back to the waiting room together, Mason refusing to let go of Elias's hand. Victoria stood when she saw them, and Lucy and Laurel stopped coloring at the table and looked up curiously. Mason, Elias said, this is my friend Victoria, and these are her daughters, Lucy and Laurel. Mason studied the twins with the serious consideration of a 7-year-old meeting potential new friends. You're twins. Yep, Laurel said. We're exactly the same, except I have this birthmark and Lucy has a scar. That's cool, Mason said. I always wanted a brother or sister. Lucy smiled. Your dad saved us. He's a real hero. Mason's chest puffed up with pride. I know. I told everyone he was a hero, but nobody believed me except my teacher. But I was right. The adults exchanged looks over the children's heads, looks that said everything about how this moment felt sacred, how something broken was being rebuilt, how families came in unexpected forms. Victoria knelt down to Mason's level. Your dad is staying with me for a little while, until he gets his own place. Which means, if it's okay with your dad, you'll get to see these two a lot. They'd love to have someone to play with. Mason looked at Elias for confirmation. At Elias's nod, Mason turned back to the girls. Do you like Legos? We love Legos, Lucy exclaimed. Then we're going to be friends, Mason decided with the simple certainty of childhood. And just like that, the four adults watched as three children who'd all survived different kinds of trauma began building something new together. Mason showed the girls his drawing. Laurel told him about their dog. Lucy asked if he wanted to help them build a Lego spaceship. Within minutes, they were sitting on the floor together, chattering like they'd known each other their whole lives. Victoria moved to stand beside Elias. He's beautiful, she said quietly. He looks just like you. He's everything, Elias replied. He's my whole world. What happens now? Where will you two live? Elias had been trying not to think about that. I don't know. I need to find a job, an apartment. Mason's in school, so we need to stay in the district. I have some back pay coming from the army, and apparently I'm entitled to compensation for wrongful imprisonment, but that'll take time to process. In the meantime, he trailed off, the weight of practical reality crashing down on the joy of reunion. In the meantime, you both stay with me, Victoria said firmly. Victoria, I can't. Yes, you can. I have a house with 8 bedrooms. Most of them are empty. You and Mason take 2 of them. Stay as long as you need. No rent, no timeline, no strings attached. She held up a hand when he started to protest. Elias, you saved my children, and more than that, you proved to my daughters that good people still exist in this world. You gave them back their faith in humanity. That's worth more than I could ever repay. So please, let me help. Let me give your son a safe place to land while you get back on your feet. Elias looked at Mason, who was showing the twins how to build what appeared to be a Lego dinosaur, and felt something crack open in his chest. Not breaking, opening, like a seed that had been buried in frozen ground finally feeling warmth and starting to grow. Okay, he said. Okay, but temporary. Just until I figure things out. Victoria smiled. Of course, temporary. They both knew she was lying. This was the beginning of something neither of them could have predicted or planned. A homeless veteran and a CEO. A single father and a mother of twins. 2 people from completely different worlds, thrown together by violence and trauma, finding in each other something neither had known they needed. But that understanding would come later. For now, Elias simply stood beside Victoria Hale, watching their children become friends, and let himself believe, for the first time in 14 months, that maybe his life wasn't over after all. Maybe it was just beginning. Mason looked up from the Lego creation and grinned at his father, that pure, unshadowed smile Elias had missed so desperately. Daddy, come help us! We're building a spaceship to Mars! Elias crossed the room and knelt beside his son, wincing slightly as his shoulder protested. Mason immediately leaned against him, unconsciously seeking that physical contact he'd been denied for so long. Lucy handed Elias a handful of blocks. Laurel explained their vision for the spaceship's cockpit, and for the first time since a courtroom had stolen his freedom and his family, Elias Ward felt something that had been missing for so long he'd almost forgotten what it felt like. He felt like he was home. Victoria's home was nothing like what Elias had expected. He'd imagined something cold and sterile, the kind of minimalist mansion that screamed wealth but lacked warmth. Instead, when Marcus Stone pulled the SUV through the iron gates and up the circular driveway, Elias found himself staring at a sprawling colonial with ivy climbing the brick facade, flower boxes beneath every window, and a tire swing hanging from an ancient oak tree in the front yard. It's big, Mason whispered from beside him, his eyes wide. It's a home, Victoria said from the front passenger seat, glancing back with a soft smile. It's meant to be lived in, not looked at. Come on, I'll show you your rooms. The girls had ridden separately with their nanny, and by the time Elias and Mason climbed out of the vehicle, Lucy and Laurel were already bounding up the front steps, their earlier trauma momentarily forgotten in the excitement of having new people in their house. Inside, the home was even more welcoming. Family photos lined the walls, Victoria with the twins at various ages, beach vacations, birthday parties, candid moments of laughter. The furniture was expensive but comfortable, the kind that invited you to sit rather than admire. Toys were scattered across the living room floor. A half-finished puzzle covered the coffee table. This wasn't a showplace. This was where a family actually lived. Your rooms are upstairs, Victoria said, leading them up a curved staircase. Mason, I thought you'd like this one. She opened a door to reveal a bedroom that made Mason gasp. It was painted a warm blue, with a window seat overlooking the backyard. There was a twin bed with a navy comforter covered in stars, a desk with art supplies already arranged, and most importantly, an entire wall of shelves waiting to be filled. Is this really for me? Mason asked, his voice small. All yours, Victoria confirmed. The girls helped me pick out the bedding. They thought you'd like stars. Mason turned to his father with tears threatening again. Daddy, I have my own room, with a real bed, and a window seat. Elias knelt down despite his shoulder's protest and pulled his son into a hug. For 14 months, Mason had slept in whatever cramped apartment Sarah could afford on her salary, sharing space that was more like shelter than home. And before that, during the trial and its aftermath, there had been times when even that was uncertain. You deserve this, buddy, Elias said thickly. You deserve a safe place to sleep and dream. Victoria quietly stepped into the hallway, giving them privacy. Elias found her a few minutes later, standing outside the next door. And this is yours, she said, opening it. The room was simpler than Mason's, but no less thoughtful. A king bed with clean white linens, a dresser and closet already stocked with clothes in his size, an armchair by the window with a reading lamp, and on the nightstand, a framed photograph that made Elias's breath catch. It was from the news coverage of the kidnapping, a grainy image captured by someone's phone showing Elias on his knees in the rain, holding Laurel, his face a study in determination and compassion even while blood streamed from his shoulder. Someone had printed it, framed it, and placed it where he'd see it every morning when he woke. I wanted you to remember, Victoria said softly. On the hard days, when you're rebuilding and everything feels impossible, I wanted you to remember who you really are. Elias couldn't speak. He just nodded. Mason appeared in the doorway, his arms full of the few possessions he'd been allowed to bring from Sarah's apartment. Daddy, can we really stay here? It's not a trick? No trick, buddy. Victoria is letting us stay as long as we need. She's nice, Mason decided. Then, with the adaptability of children, he asked, What's for dinner? I'm hungry. Victoria laughed. Victoria, how about we order pizza? You and the girls can pick the toppings. That first dinner together was chaotic and wonderful. 4 children debating whether pineapple belonged on pizza. Mason and Lucy thought yes, Laurel thought no, and they all campaigned passionately for their positions. Victoria and Elias sat at opposite ends of the long dining table, watching the kids interact with the awkward awareness of 2 adults still figuring out the boundaries of this strange new arrangement. After dinner, the children scattered to Mason's new room to build an even more elaborate Lego spaceship. Elias and Victoria found themselves alone in the kitchen, cleaning up paper plates and pizza boxes. He's adjusting well, Victoria observed. Mason, I worried it might be overwhelming. He's resilient, Elias said. He's had to be, but yeah, I'm grateful he's taking this in stride. He paused, setting down the trash bag he'd been filling. Victoria, I need to say something. I know you keep telling me this is repayment for saving Laurel, but we both know that doesn't justify all this. You've given me back my entire life, my freedom, my son, a place to live, legal representation that would cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. I can never repay that. Victoria turned to face him, leaning against the counter. You're right. You can't. But that's not why I'm doing it. She crossed her arms, not defensively, but thoughtfully. Elias, I've spent the last 3 years building a company that exists in a world of moral compromise, defense contracts, military spending, navigating Pentagon politics. I've had to make decisions that kept me up at night. I've had to play games with people like Marcus Webb, who see ethics as obstacles rather than guidelines. She moved to the kitchen window, looking out at the backyard where the tire swing swayed gently in the evening breeze. When those men took my daughters, I felt completely helpless for the first time in my adult life. All my money, all my influence, all my carefully cultivated connections, none of it mattered. My children were being stolen, and I couldn't stop it. She turned back to him. And then you appeared. A man the world had discarded. A man with nothing. And you did what dozens of people with everything couldn't do. You ran toward danger because it was right. I'm not special, Elias protested. Yes, you are, Victoria said firmly, because most people aren't willing to sacrifice themselves for strangers. Most people choose safety over conscience. You didn't. You proved that goodness isn't about resources or status. It's about character. She smiled sadly. You reminded me what kind of world I want to build for my daughters. So this isn't charity, Elias. This is me trying to be the kind of person my children already think you are. Before Elias could respond, Mason's voice echoed down from upstairs. Daddy, come see! We finished the spaceship and it's awesome! The moment passed, but something had shifted between them. An understanding reached, a foundation laid. The next 3 weeks were a blur of adjustment and healing. Mason started at a new school, one near Victoria's house, one where the other kids' parents were lawyers and doctors and executives who didn't know or care about Elias's past. The administration had been briefed by Victoria's lawyers, and they welcomed Mason with the kind of careful kindness reserved for children who'd been through trauma. Elias spent his days attending physical therapy for his shoulder, meeting with lawyers to handle the remaining legal complications of his exoneration, and trying to figure out what came next. The Army had reinstated his honorable discharge and was processing his back pay. A compensation claim for wrongful imprisonment had been filed. But all of that took time, and in the meantime, Elias existed in a strange limbo, legally free but practically dependent. The nights were the hardest. Mason had nightmares, not about the recent events, but older fears surfacing now that he felt safe enough to express them. Dreams where his father disappeared again. Dreams where he was alone. Elias would wake to his son's cries and rush to the blue bedroom, holding Mason until the fear passed. I'm here, Elias would whisper into his son's hair. I'm right here. I'm never leaving. Promise? I promise. Sometimes during these late-night vigils, Elias would hear movement from across the hall. Once he'd looked up to find Victoria standing in her doorway in a robe, watching him comfort Mason with an expression of such profound sadness that it took his breath away. She'd mouthed coffee and disappeared downstairs. 10 minutes later, after Mason had fallen back asleep, Elias had followed. They'd sat at the kitchen island in the dim light of the range hood, drinking coffee and not talking about the obvious, that they were both people rebuilding from trauma, both single parents doing their best, both learning what it meant to trust again after betrayal. Lucy still wakes up screaming, Victoria had said finally. Every night. She dreams they're taking her again, that the van drives away and no one stops it. Mason dreams I disappear, Elias had replied, that he wakes up and I'm gone and it was all a dream. How do we fix them? I don't know. Time, maybe. Consistency. Proving over and over that they're safe until they believe it. Victoria had nodded, her hands wrapped around her mug. I keep thinking about all those people who watched, who saw my daughters being taken and did nothing. How do I explain that to them? How do I tell them that most people are good when they saw evidence to the contrary? You tell them about the exceptions, Elias had said. You tell them that good people do exist, that one person willing to act matters more than 100 who freeze. You tell them the truth. The world is complicated and scary sometimes, but there are still people worth believing in. She'd looked at him then with an intensity that made his chest tight. People like you. People like all of us, he'd corrected. You're raising 2 girls who'll remember that their mother fought for a stranger's freedom because it was right. That's teaching them something important, too. That conversation had stayed with Elias for days afterward, echoing in quiet moments. The preliminary hearing for Marcus Webb's trial was scheduled for a Tuesday morning. Jennifer Krause had asked Elias if he wanted to attend, to see the man who'd destroyed his life face justice. Elias had gone, with Victoria beside him for support. The courtroom was packed with media. Webb sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his expensive suit replaced with prison attire, his arrogance dimmed but not extinguished. When his eyes found Elias in the gallery, something cold and vicious flickered across his face. The prosecution laid out their case with methodical precision. The evidence of the kidnapping conspiracy, the financial crimes, the murder-for-hire charges related to 2 witnesses who died under suspicious circumstances, and then, almost as an afterthought, the evidence of Elias's wrongful conviction. The defendant's pattern of eliminating threats is well established, the prosecutor said. When Sergeant Ward refused to participate in the defendant's criminal enterprise, Webb didn't simply fire him or report him. He systematically destroyed his life. Fabricated evidence, suborned perjury, bribed a federal judge. He turned the justice system into a weapon and nearly succeeded in eliminating a good man entirely. Webb's lawyer tried to argue for bail. The judge, an older man with steel-gray hair and eyes that had clearly seen too much, denied it without hesitation. Mr. Webb, you are accused of crimes that demonstrate a profound disregard for human life and the rule of law. You targeted children. You corrupted the judicial system. You attempted to murder witnesses. I wouldn't grant you bail if you offered me every penny you possess. Remand to continue. The gavel fell. Webb was led away. As he passed Elias's row, he leaned slightly toward them and spoke quietly enough that only those nearby could hear. You should have stayed forgotten, Ward. You and that self-righteous bitch. You have no idea what you've started. Marcus Stone materialized between Webb and Elias before anyone could react. Keep walking, he said coldly to the prisoner. The marshals pulled Webb away, but the threat hung in the air like poison. Outside the courthouse, Victoria was shaking. Did he just threaten us? He did, Elias confirmed, in front of witnesses, in front of his lawyers and prosecutors and marshals. He's desperate, Marcus Stone said, already on his phone, presumably increasing security protocols. Desperate men are dangerous men. That night, after Mason and the twins were asleep, Elias found Victoria in her home office, staring at her computer screen without really seeing it. Hey, he said from the doorway. You okay? I can't stop thinking about what he said. You have no idea what you've started. What does that mean? Elias entered the office and sat in the chair across from her desk. It means he's going down and he knows it. He's trying to scare us. It's working. I know. But we have security. We have protection. And more importantly, we have the truth on our side. Webb's done. The evidence against him is overwhelming. He'll spend the rest of his life in prison. Victoria pushed back from her desk. You know what the worst part is? I'm supposed to be strong. I'm a CEO. I've negotiated with Pentagon officials and foreign governments. I've made decisions that affected thousands of employees. But right now, I'm just a mom who's terrified something will happen to her kids. That's not weakness, Elias said gently. That's love. And it's exactly what makes you strong. You're fighting for them. That's what parents do. Is that what you told yourself? When everything fell apart and you lost Mason? The question hit harder than she'd probably intended. Elias was quiet for a long moment. I told myself a lot of things, he finally said. I told myself I'd survive so I could get back to him. I told myself the truth would come out eventually. I told myself that even if I never got my life back, at least I'd lived it trying to be the kind of man my son could be proud of. He met her eyes. And on the worst nights, when I was sleeping under bridges and wondering if I'd freeze to death, I told myself that somewhere my son was safe and warm, and that was enough. But it wasn't enough, was it? No, Elias admitted. It wasn't, but it kept me alive. And staying alive meant I was here that night. I was there when Laurel needed someone. So maybe all that suffering had a point after all. Victoria stood and moved around the desk. For a moment, Elias thought she might hug him, but instead she extended her hand. He took it, confused, and she pulled him to his feet. Come on, she said. I want to show you something. She led him through the house and out the French doors to the backyard. The night was clear, stars visible, despite the suburban light pollution. The tire swing swayed in the breeze. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. When I bought this house, Victoria said, it was right after my divorce. The twins were 4. I was building the company from nothing, working 18-hour days, trying to prove I could do it all. And I was terrified I was failing them, that I was so focused on success that I was missing their childhood. She walked to the tire swing and ran her hand over the rope. One night, Lucy asked me why we didn't have a tire swing like her friend's house, and I realized I'd been so busy trying to provide for them that I'd forgotten to just be with them. So that weekend, I found this old oak tree, bought a tire and some rope, and we hung it together. The girls helped. We made a whole day of it, and after, we had a picnic right here in the grass and watched the sunset. She turned to face Elias. That was the day I decided that money and success weren't the point. The point was building a life worth living, creating moments worth remembering, being present. Why are you telling me this? Because you already understand it. You lost everything, and the only thing you fought to get back was your son. Not your career, not your reputation, not revenge, your child. She smiled sadly. That's who you are, Elias, and that's why I trust you. Not just with my daughter's safety, but with their hearts. You're teaching them something my ex-husband never could, that some people really are worth believing in. Elias didn't know what to say to that. The weight of her trust, of her vulnerability, of this moment under the stars felt significant in ways he couldn't fully articulate. I'm just trying not to screw up my second chance, he finally managed. You won't, Victoria said with certainty, because you care too much to let it happen. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, both lost in thoughts of children sleeping safely upstairs and the strange paths that had brought them to this moment. Finally, Victoria spoke again. Elias, I need to tell you something. The DoD contract decision is tomorrow. They're announcing the winner at 2 p.m. Tomorrow? Already? Webb's arrest accelerated things. They wanted to move forward without the cloud of his criminal investigation hanging over everything. She took a breath. My company is going to win. I know that sounds arrogant, but I've been doing this long enough to read the signs. We're going to get the contract. That's incredible. Congratulations. Thank you, but it means things are going to change. Media attention, increased security. My schedule is going to get insane for a while. She hesitated. I don't want you and Mason to feel like you have to leave. This is your home for as long as you need it, but I also know it might get complicated. We'll figure it out, Elias interrupted. You've done everything for us. If you need space, if things get too chaotic, we can find somewhere. That's not what I'm saying. Victoria cut him off. I'm saying I want you to stay, both of you. I'm saying the girls talk about Mason like he's family already. I'm saying Lucy told me yesterday that having you here makes her feel safe. And I'm saying that She trailed off, seeming to reconsider her words. I'm saying I like having you here too. All of you. This house has felt more like a home in the last 3 weeks than it has in years. Before Elias could process that, before he could examine the implications of what she was saying and what it might mean, his phone buzzed. He pulled it out to find a text from Jennifer Krause. Sarah just took a plea deal, he read aloud. She's testifying against Webb. In exchange, she's getting 2 years probation and mandatory counseling, no jail time. He looked up at Victoria. Jennifer says this is good for our custody case. With Sarah pleading guilty to conspiracy, I should get full custody of Mason within the month. How do you feel about that? Elias thought about it. About Sarah, the woman he'd once loved, the mother of his child, who'd betrayed him so completely. Did he feel vindicated, angry, sad? I feel like I want to do what's best for Mason, he said finally. He needs stability. He needs to know his world isn't going to fall apart again. And if that means I have sole custody, then that's what needs to happen. He paused. But Sarah is still his mother. Once she's served her time, once she's gotten help, I don't want to keep Mason from her completely. He deserves to have both his parents in his life if that's possible. Victoria studied him with an expression he couldn't quite read. You're a better person than most, you know that? I'm just trying to break the cycle. Someone hurt me, so I hurt them back, so they hurt me worse. It doesn't end. Mason doesn't need to grow up watching his parents destroy each other. He's seen enough destruction. He's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have him. He's the only reason I survived the last 14 months. Every time I wanted to give up, I thought about his face and kept going. They headed back inside as the night grew colder. At the top of the stairs, they paused outside their respective bedroom doors. "Thank you," Elias said, "for tonight, for listening, for understanding." "Thank you for being someone worth understanding," Victoria replied. She disappeared into her room, and Elias went to check on Mason one more time before bed. His son was sprawled across the mattress in the boneless way children sleep, his mouth slightly open, one hand clutching the blanket. The nightlight, shaped like a rocket ship, cast soft shadows on the walls. Elias sat on the edge of the bed and gently brushed hair from Mason's forehead. His son stirred slightly, mumbling something that might have been "Daddy," before settling back into deep sleep. "I love you, buddy," Elias whispered, "more than you'll ever know." He was almost to the door when Mason's sleepy voice reached him. "Love you too, Daddy. I'm glad we live here. I'm glad we found Victoria and Lucy and Laurel." "Me too, son. Me too." The next afternoon, Victoria's assistant called an impromptu gathering in the living room. The children were at school, so it was just Victoria, Elias, Marcus Stone, and Jennifer Krause, who'd stopped by to discuss the custody proceedings, when the television was turned to the Department of Defense press conference. A stern-looking official stood at a podium covered in military insignia and American flags. After careful consideration of all proposals, and in light of recent developments concerning one of the finalist companies, the Department of Defense is pleased to announce that Hale Defense Systems has been awarded the contract for the Next Generation Tactical Communications Network. This $12 billion 10-year contract represents a commitment to cutting-edge technology, ethical business practices, and a partnership we believe will serve our military personnel with the highest standards of excellence. Victoria's hand flew to her mouth. She'd expected it, but hearing it officially was something else entirely. Elias, without thinking, pulled her into a hug. "You did it. You won." "We won," she said into his shoulder. "None of this would have happened if you hadn't stopped Webb's plan." Jennifer was already on her phone, texting someone. Marcus Stone looked genuinely pleased, which was saying something for a man who usually maintained careful neutrality. "Ma'am," Marcus said, "I'm going to need to brief you on increased security protocols. This announcement is going to generate attention, and with Webb still awaiting trial—" "I know," Victoria said, pulling back from Elias. "We'll meet this evening. Right now, I need to call the board, then the twins' school to let them know I'll be picking them up personally today." The rest of the afternoon was controlled chaos. Victoria fielded calls from board members, investors, Pentagon officials, and media outlets. Elias tried to stay out of the way, helping prepare snacks for when the kids got home, feeling oddly domestic in a house that wasn't his, but was starting to feel like it could be. When Mason and the twins burst through the door after school, their excited chatter about a science experiment involving volcanoes, Victoria swept them all into a hug. "Guess what?" she said. "Mommy's company just won something very important." "Does that mean you'll be gone more?" Lucy asked, her voice small. Victoria's expression shifted instantly from triumph to concern. "No, baby, I'm not going anywhere, I promise." "That's what you said before," Laurel said quietly. And then those men came. The joy drained from the room. Victoria knelt down to the twins' level. "Look at me, both of you. That was different. Those men are in jail. They can never hurt us again. And I'm going to make sure we're all safe. That's why Marcus is here. That's why we have security. And that's why—" She glanced at Elias, something passing between them. "That's why we're all going to stick together." Mason, sensing the shift in mood, moved closer to his father. Elias put a hand on his shoulder. "Hey," Elias said to all three children, "how about we celebrate your mom's big win with ice cream for dinner?" "Ice cream for dinner?" Mason's eyes went wide. "Just this once," Victoria said, grateful for the redirect. "But real dinner first, then ice cream." The evening settled into something approaching normal, though Elias noticed the increased security presence outside. Additional guards patrolling the perimeter, cameras being checked and rechecked, Marcus Stone having quiet conversations on his phone in corners of the house. After dinner, after ice cream had been consumed with appropriate enthusiasm, After the children had been tucked into bed with extra hugs and reassurances, Elias and Victoria found themselves once again in the kitchen, the unofficial gathering place for their late-night conversations. It should feel better than this, Victoria said, staring at her glass of wine. Winning, finally beating Webb. But all I can think about is how Lucy asked if I'd be gone more, how they're still scared. They're kids who went through something traumatic, Elias said gently. It's going to take time. But Victoria, look at how far they've come. 3 weeks ago, they couldn't be separated. Now they're playing with Mason, going to school, laughing again. That's progress. What if it's not enough? What if I can't protect them from— Stop, Elias interrupted. You can't live in the what if. Trust me, I spent 14 months doing exactly that, and it nearly destroyed me. What if I never see Mason again? What if he forgets me? What if the truth never comes out? You can drive yourself crazy with what ifs. So what do I do instead? You focus on what is. Your daughters are safe. They're healing. You want a contract that's going to cement your company's future. Marcus Webb is in jail awaiting trial on charges that will put him away forever, and you have people around you who care. He paused. You focus on building the life you want, not running from the one you fear. Victoria set down her wine glass and moved around the island to stand in front of him. When did you get so wise? Somewhere between rock bottom and here. Perspective comes cheap when you lose everything. She reached out and took his hand, a gesture that was becoming familiar between them, this physical connection that anchored them both. Elias, I need to tell you something, and I need you to really hear me. His heart rate kicked up. Okay. These last 3 weeks, having you and Mason here, it's changed things for me, for the girls. This house used to feel like a place we existed in. Now it feels like a home. And that's because of you, because of the way you show up for Mason every single day, the way you've been patient with the twins, the way you've just been here. Victoria, please, let me finish. I know this is complicated. I know you're still rebuilding your life. I know you probably want your own space eventually, but I need you to know that when I said you could stay as long as you need, I meant it. Not out of obligation, not out of gratitude, but because I want you here, both of you, as part of this family we're building. Elias looked down at their joined hands, then back up at her face. He saw vulnerability there, hope, fear, the same complicated tangle of emotions he felt whenever he thought too hard about what was happening between them. I want that too, he admitted. More than I probably should, but Victoria, I'm still the guy who was sleeping under a bridge a month ago. I'm still unemployed, living in your house, dependent on your charity. It's not charity, she said firmly, and you're not some project I'm fixing. You're a man who saved my children, a man who's shown my daughters what strength and goodness look like, a man who— She stopped, seemed to gather courage. A man I'm starting to care about in ways that have nothing to do with gratitude. The words hung between them, impossible to take back, changing everything. I care about you too, Elias said quietly. But I need to make sure I'm not just latching on to the first person who showed me kindness. I need to make sure this is real, and not just trauma bonding, or— I know, Victoria interrupted. I'm not asking for anything right now. I'm just telling you how I feel. What you do with that information is up to you. She squeezed his hand once more, then let go. But I want you to know that when you're ready, when you've rebuilt enough of yourself to feel whole again, I'll still be here. We'll still be here. This doesn't have an expiration date. Before Elias could respond, Mason's scream shattered the quiet. They both bolted for the stairs, taking them 2 at a time. Elias reached Mason's room first, bursting through the door to find his son sitting up in bed, his face wet with tears, his whole body shaking. Daddy, I had the bad dream again. Elias was at the bedside in an instant, gathering Mason into his arms. I'm here, buddy. I'm right here. You're safe. You were gone. You disappeared and I couldn't find you, and Mom said you were never coming back. That's not real, Elias said firmly. That was just a dream. I'm here. Feel my arms around you? Hear my voice? I'm real, and I'm here, and I'm never leaving you. Victoria appeared in the doorway, and a moment later footsteps announced the twins had woken too. Is Mason okay? Lucy asked from the hallway. He had a nightmare, Victoria explained softly. Let's give them some space. But Mason had heard. No, wait, Lucy, Laurel, you can come in. It's okay. The girls padded into the room in their matching pajamas, looking worried. Mason wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. I'm sorry I woke you up, he said. It's okay, Laurel said. We have bad dreams too, all the time. About the kidnappers? Yeah, and other stuff. Lucy climbed onto the bed without asking permission, settling near Mason. Laurel followed suit. They sat in a small cluster, these three children who'd all survived their own brands of trauma, finding comfort in shared understanding. My therapist says the bad dreams will get less scary if we talk about them, Lucy offered. Do you want to talk about yours? Mason looked at his father for permission. Elias nodded. I dream that my dad leaves again, Mason said. That everything good was pretend, and I wake up and he's gone. That won't happen, Laurel said with absolute certainty. Your dad is like the bravest person ever. He ran into danger for us. He got shot. People who do that don't just leave. But he left before, Mason said quietly. He didn't leave, Lucy corrected. Bad people made it so he couldn't be with you. That's different. He was fighting to come back the whole time. Right, Mr. Elias? Every single day, Elias confirmed. Every single day I was fighting to get back to you, Mason. And now that I have you, nothing is going to take me away again, I promise. Cross your heart? Cross my heart and hope to die. That's a good promise, Laurel decided. The hoping to die part makes it extra real. Victoria, still standing in the doorway, caught Elias's eye. He saw tears there and understanding. She was watching her daughters help someone else heal, seeing them use their own pain to comfort another child, and recognizing what Elias had told her earlier. They were getting better. Not overnight, not completely, but day by day, moment by moment. All right, you three, Victoria said gently. It's late. How about the girls stay in here for tonight? We can pull in some extra blankets, make it like a sleepover. Really? All three kids said in unison. Really? But that means you all go to sleep. Tomorrow is a school day. 10 minutes later, the twins were curled up in sleeping bags on Mason's floor, and Mason was back in his bed, but the door was left open and the hallway light stayed on. Elias and Victoria stood in the hallway between their rooms. They're going to be okay, Victoria said softly. Yeah, Elias agreed. They are. All of them. Because they have each other, and they have us. She looked at him then with an expression of such tenderness that it made his chest ache. Good night, Elias. Good night, Victoria. They retreated to their separate rooms, but Elias lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, thinking about the woman across the hall and the impossible, complicated, terrifying feelings growing between them. He thought about Mason sleeping safely down the corridor, about two little girls who'd started to heal, about second chances and new beginnings. And he thought about Victoria's words. I'm starting to care about you in ways that have nothing to do with gratitude. He was starting to care about her too, starting to see her not as his savior, but as a woman, strong and vulnerable, fierce and tender, brilliant and uncertain. A mother doing her best, a person scarred by betrayal learning to trust again, someone very much like himself. The realization didn't terrify him as much as he'd expected. Maybe because after losing everything, the idea of building something new didn't feel impossible anymore. It felt like hope. And hope, Elias had learned, was worth fighting for. The weeks that followed Victoria's contract win transformed into months, and with them came a rhythm that felt less like temporary shelter and more like actual life. Elias started working again, not immediately in defense contracting, but in security consulting, a field where his military background and recent experience gave him unique credibility. Victoria had connected him with several firms looking for someone who understood both tactical operations and the human cost of failure. The irony wasn't lost on him that his homelessness and wrongful conviction had become selling points in a weird way, proof that he understood what happened when systems failed the people they were supposed to protect. The paychecks weren't huge at first, but they were his. Money he'd earned. Money that meant he wasn't entirely dependent on Victoria's generosity, even though she'd made it clear 1,000 times that his financial contribution wasn't required or expected. I'm paying rent, he'd told her one morning over coffee, sliding an envelope across the kitchen counter. She'd pushed it back without opening it. Absolutely not. Victoria, Elias, you're helping with the kids. You fixed the fence last week. You've been driving them to school half the time because my schedule is insane. You cook dinner at least 3 nights a week. You're not a tenant. You're family." The word had hit him harder than she probably intended. Family. Was that what this was becoming? Mason certainly thought so. He'd stopped referring to Victoria's house as where we're staying and started calling it home. He invited school friends over without asking permission first, assuming correctly that it would be fine. He helped the twins with their homework. He'd started calling Victoria Miss Victoria, which had somehow evolved into just Victoria, and occasionally, heartbreakingly, slipped into Mom when he was excited or distracted. The first time it happened, they'd all been at the dinner table. Mason had been telling an animated story about science class and had turned to Victoria with, "Mom, did you know that octopuses have 3 hearts?" The table had gone silent. Mason's face had flushed red with embarrassment. Sorry, I meant Victoria, I didn't—" "It's okay," Victoria had said gently, her own eyes suspiciously bright. "I don't mind at all. And yes, I did know that about octopuses. It's pretty amazing, isn't it?" Later that night, after the kids were in bed, Victoria had found Elias in the living room. "Is it okay?" she'd asked. "That Mason called me that? I don't want to overstep. Sarah is still his mother, even with everything that happened." "Sarah gave up the right to that title when she lied to destroy me," Elias had said, his voice harder than he'd intended. He'd softened it immediately. "But yes, it's okay. You've been more of a mother to him in these months than Sarah was in the year before I was convicted. You show up. You care. You make him feel safe. That's what matters. He's an incredible kid." "He is. And you're an incredible woman for seeing that." The moment had stretched between them, heavy with unspoken words, until Victoria had smiled and changed the subject to something about the twins' upcoming school play. But those moments kept happening, accumulating, building into something neither of them seemed quite ready to name, but both recognized was there. The custody hearing had been almost anticlimactic. Sarah had appeared via video link from the counseling facility where she was serving her probation, looking diminished and genuinely remorseful. She'd agreed to Elias having full custody without contest. The judge had granted supervised visitation rights starting in 6 months, after Sarah completed her mandated therapy. "I'm sorry," Sarah had said during her brief statement, her eyes finding Elias through the screen, "for everything. I can't undo what I did, but I want Mason to know I love him, and I want him to have the life he deserves with you." Elias had nodded, accepting it without warmth, but without cruelty either. Some betrayals were too deep to forgive quickly, but Mason didn't need to grow up watching his parents hate each other. That was a poison Elias refused to pass on. Walking out of the courthouse with full legal custody of his son had felt surreal. Mason had been waiting with Marcus Stone. The security consultant had become something like an uncle figure to all 3 kids, and when Elias gave him the thumbs up, Mason had whooped and thrown himself into his father's arms. "We won?" Mason had asked. "We won, buddy. You're officially mine. Completely, legally, permanently mine." "I was always yours, Dad. The judge just figured it out late." Victoria had been waiting in the car, having stayed back to give them privacy for this moment, but Mason had insisted she come to the celebration dinner. "It's a family thing," he'd said matter-of-factly. "She's part of our family." And there it was again, that word, family. The 4 of them, soon to be 5 counting the twins, gathering to celebrate victories and weather storms together. Marcus Webb's trial had stretched across 3 months, a media spectacle that dragged every detail of his crimes into public view. Elias had testified, as had Victoria, as had the twins in a closed session with child psychologists present. The evidence was overwhelming. The prosecution painted a picture of a man who'd built an empire on theft, fraud, and violence, who destroyed anyone who got in his way. The jury had deliberated for less than 6 hours. Guilty on all counts. Webb had been sentenced to 45 years in federal prison without possibility of parole. He'd be 93 if he somehow survived the full sentence. Judge Hartford had received 22 years. The soldiers who'd testified falsely against Elias had taken plea deals for lesser sentences in exchange for their cooperation. Elias had watched the sentencing via closed-circuit television from a secure location, Victoria beside him, Marcus Stone lurking nearby. When the judge pronounced sentence, Victoria had reached for his hand. "It's over," she'd said. Finally over. Yeah, Elias had agreed, but the satisfaction felt muted. Justice served didn't undo the damage. It didn't give him back the 14 months he'd lost. It didn't erase Mason's nightmares or the twins' trauma. It was necessary, but it wasn't healing. Healing came from other places. It came from Mason's 7th birthday party, celebrated in Victoria's backyard with school friends and too much cake and a water balloon fight that somehow ended with all the adults soaked too. From watching Mason blow out his candles and make a wish with Lucy and Laurel singing off-key beside him. It came from the girls' school play where Lucy performed as a very serious tree and Laurel as an equally serious rock, and the whole family had applauded like they were watching Broadway. Mason had made a poster that said, "Best Tree and Rock Ever," and held it up during the curtain call, making his sisters dissolve into giggles. It came from quiet evenings when the kids did homework at the kitchen table while Elias cooked dinner and Victoria handled business calls with one eye on her daughters, orchestrating this careful balance of work and family. It came from the first time Lucy had a nightmare and ran not to Victoria's room but to Elias's, climbing into bed beside him and whispering, "I dreamed about the bad men again. Can I stay here?" And Elias had held her until she fell back asleep, this child who wasn't his, but somehow was anyway. It came from Laurel's science project about heroes, where she'd interviewed Elias about what made someone brave, and written in her careful handwriting, "Heroes are people who do the right thing even when they're scared. My hero is Mr. Elias because he saved me when everyone else was too scared." It came from all 3 kids building a blanket fort in the living room that somehow consumed 3/4 of the furniture, and from finding them asleep inside it in a pile of pillows and stuffed animals in contentment. It came from Victoria. They'd developed a routine of late-night conversations, meeting in the kitchen after the kids were asleep to decompress over coffee or wine or sometimes just water. They talked about everything and nothing, about work stress and childhood memories, about parenting fears and future dreams, about the weirdness of building a life from ruins. One night, about 6 months after Elias and Mason had moved in, Victoria had brought up the subject they'd been dancing around since that conversation about caring for each other. "Elias, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." He'd set down his coffee cup, his stomach tightening. "Okay. Are you happy here? Really happy? Or are you just comfortable because it's easier than figuring out what comes next?" The question had caught him off guard. "What makes you ask that?" "Because I need to know if you're staying because you want to or because you feel obligated. Because if it's obligation, if you're just being polite or grateful or whatever, then I need to know that. I need to know where we actually stand." Elias had taken a moment to really examine the question. Was he staying out of convenience, out of gratitude, or was it something else? "I'm happy," he'd said finally. "Genuinely happy. Happier than I've been in years, maybe ever. And it's not just because this house is nicer than an overpass, Victoria. It's because of you. Because of how you are with Mason. Because of how the twins look at me like I'm some kind of superhero when we both know I'm just a guy trying his best. It's because when I come home from work, this place feels like home. Not your home that you're letting me borrow. Just home." Victoria had been quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the rim of her wine glass. "I think I'm falling in love with you," she'd said finally, the words tumbling out like she'd been holding them back for weeks. "And I know that's complicated and probably too fast and maybe completely insane given everything we've both been through. But it's true, and I'm tired of pretending it's not." Elias's heart had hammered against his ribs. "Victoria, you don't have to say anything back," she'd interrupted quickly. "I'm not asking for anything. I'm just being honest. I told you I would be that night after the contract was announced, and I'm keeping that promise. But I also need to know if there's any possibility that you could feel the same way. Because if there's not, if I'm alone in this, then I need to know so I can recalibrate expectations." Elias had stood up from his stool and moved around the kitchen island to where she sat. He'd taken both her hands in his. "You're not alone in this," he'd said quietly. "I think I've been falling for you since that day you walked into my hospital room and promised to get my life back. Since watching you with your daughters. Since realizing that you're not just strong, you're kind. You're not just smart, you're thoughtful. You fought for me when no one else would have, and you did it because it was right, not because you expected anything in return." So what does that mean? Victoria had asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It means I'm terrified, Elias had admitted, because the last woman I loved destroyed me, because I'm still rebuilding who I am, because I don't want to screw this up, whatever this is, but it also means I want to try. If you're willing to be patient with me while I figure out how to trust again, I want to see where this goes. Victoria had stood, closing the small distance between them. I'm patient. I can do patient. Even when I'm difficult, when the PTSD kicks in, when I wake up at 3 a.m. convinced this is all temporary and about to fall apart, even then. Because Elias, you've seen me at my worst. You've seen me terrified for my children. You've seen me fall apart and put myself back together. And you've never once made me feel weak for it. You think I'm not going to extend the same grace to you? He'd cupped her face in his hands then, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. We should probably take this slow, for the kids. Make sure we're doing this right. Agreed. Slow is good. No rushing into anything. Absolutely not. We should probably seal that agreement with a kiss, though, Elias had said, a smile tugging at his lips. Just to make it official. Victoria had laughed, the sound light and genuine. That seems reasonable. When their lips met, it was gentle, careful. A first kiss between two people who'd survived too much to treat connection carelessly. But it was also warm and right and full of promise. They'd pulled apart after a moment, both slightly breathless. So, Victoria had said, that was... Yeah, Elias had agreed. Should we tell the kids? Maybe wait a bit? Make sure we know what we're doing first? Good call. They'd lasted approximately 3 days before Mason had cornered Elias in the garage where he'd been fixing something that didn't really need fixing. Dad, are you dating Victoria? Elias had nearly dropped the wrench. What? Why would you ask that? Because you smile different when she's around. And you do that thing where you watch her when you think no one's looking, and yesterday I saw you hold hands in the hallway. We were not holding hands. You totally were for like 3 whole seconds. I counted. Elias had set down his tools and pulled his son into a seat on the workbench beside him. Okay, you got me. Yes, Victoria and we're seeing where things might go. How do you feel about that? Mason had shrugged. I think it's cool. She's nice, and she makes you happy. Plus, if you married her, Lucy and Laurel would officially be my sisters, and that would be awesome because they're basically my sisters already. Whoa, buddy, nobody said anything about marriage. But you could, though, right? Like, eventually? Mason, it's way too early to think about that. But you're not saying no. I'm saying it's complicated, and we're taking things one day at a time. Mason had studied his father with those 2 wise eyes. Dad, you know it's okay to be happy, right? You don't have to feel bad about it. You deserve good things. The simple wisdom of that statement had hit Elias square in the chest. How had his 7-year-old son figured out something Elias himself still struggled with? Thanks, buddy. That means a lot. Can I go tell Lucy and Laurel? Tell them what? That you and Victoria are boyfriend and girlfriend. They'll think it's romantic. Please don't say boyfriend and girlfriend. We're adults. Fine. That you're dating. Same thing. Mason... But his son was already racing back into the house, calling for the twins. Elias had followed to find all 3 children in an excited huddle in the living room. I knew it, Laurel was saying. I told you. I said they were being weird at each other. Does this mean you'll live here forever? Lucy asked when Elias appeared. It means we're figuring things out, Elias had said carefully. Nothing's changing right now. Your mom and I just want to spend some time getting to know each other better. You already know each other, Mason pointed out. You live in the same house. Romantic getting to know each other, Laurel clarified with the air of an expert. Like dates and stuff. Sarah from my class says her dad does dates with his girlfriend and they go to fancy restaurants and movies. We're not telling the whole school about this, Elias had said quickly. This is family business, private. All 3 kids had nodded solemnly, and Elias had known with absolute certainty that by tomorrow afternoon, half of their combined class lists would know. Victoria had taken the revelation in stride when Elias told her. Well, I guess we're official then. Kid approved and everything. We should probably actually go on a date, Elias had suggested. Like a real one. not just hanging out in the kitchen at midnight. Elias Ward, are you asking me out? I guess I am. Dinner? This Saturday? Somewhere that requires actual pants, not sweatpants? Sweatpants or pants. You know what I mean? I do. And yes, I'd love to. The date had been wonderful and awkward in equal measure. They'd gone to a nice Italian restaurant, both of them overdressed and nervous, talking about everything except the elephant in the room, that they were two single parents who'd been living together for months, suddenly trying to figure out romance. This is weird, right? Victoria had said finally, halfway through appetizers. We're on a date, but we already know everything about each other. You've seen me with the stomach flu. I've seen you at physical therapy crying from pain. We've co-parented 3 kids through homework meltdowns and nightmares. What are we supposed to talk about? Our hopes and dreams? Do you have hopes and dreams I don't know about? I hope the breadbasket comes back soon because I'm starving and I dream about those garlic knots. Elias had laughed, the tension breaking. Okay, so maybe we skip the getting to know you phase and just acknowledge we're already past that. Deal. So what do we talk about instead? We could discuss the fact that Mason asked me this morning when I was going to propose to you. Victoria had choked on her water. He what? Apparently, in his mind, dating leads directly to marriage. No intermediate steps. What did you tell him? That we're taking things slow, that we want to make sure we're making good decisions for everyone involved. Very mature and responsible. I didn't mention that every time you smile at me, I have to remind myself not to do something impulsive. Victoria had set down her glass, her expression shifting into something more serious. Like what? Like tell you I love you, even though it's way too soon and probably too much, but it's true anyway. The restaurant noise had faded into background static. Victoria had reached across the table to take his hand. Elias, I love you too. I think I have for months. So if you want to say it, say it. We've been through too much to play games or follow arbitrary timelines about what's too fast or too slow. I love you, Elias had said, simple and certain. I love you, and I love your daughters, and I love the life we're building together. I love you too. All of you. The whole package. You and Mason and this completely insane situation we found ourselves in. They'd left dinner early, unable to focus on food when everything else felt more important. Marcus Stone had driven them home. Security protocols remained even months after Webb's conviction, and they'd found the kids asleep in a fort they'd constructed in the living room, the babysitter reading on the couch nearby. They insisted on waiting up for you, the babysitter had explained, but they crashed about 30 minutes ago. Elias and Victoria had stood looking at their children because that's what they were now, theirs collectively, tangled together in sleep. We're doing this, Victoria had said quietly. We're really building a family. We really are. Are you scared? Terrified. You? Completely. But I also can't imagine anything else anymore. The next several months unfolded with surprising ease. Not that there weren't challenges. Victoria's work schedule remained demanding. Elias still occasionally woke from nightmares about his time on the streets. The twins still had bad days where their trauma surfaced. And Mason struggled sometimes with the reality that his biological mother had betrayed him so completely. But there were also birthday parties and school concerts, science projects and math homework, family dinners and movie nights. Slowly, carefully, they wove their separate lives into something unified. Elias proposed on a random Tuesday. There was no grand plan, no elaborate setup. They were in the backyard, the kids playing on the tire swing, the evening sun painting everything gold. Victoria was laughing at something Mason had said, her head thrown back, completely unself-conscious and beautiful. And Elias had just known. He'd pulled the ring from his pocket. He'd been carrying it for 2 weeks, waiting for the perfect moment, and suddenly realized the perfect moment was just this, just life, just them. Victoria. She'd turned, seen the ring, and her hand had flown to her mouth. Elias. I know we've done everything backward. I lived in your house before I took you on a date. We said I love you before we'd kissed more than twice. We built a family before we defined what we were to each other. But that's us. That's our story. And I don't want to wait anymore to make it official. He'd gotten down on one knee right there on the grass, not caring that the kids could see, not caring that this wasn't some romantic restaurant or scenic overlook. Victoria Hale, you saved my life in every way a person can be saved. You gave me back my son, my freedom, my faith in people. You let me be part of your family when I had nothing to offer but myself. And now I'm asking if you'll let me spend the rest of my life proving that was enough. Will you marry me? Victoria had been crying, nodding before she could get the words out. Yes. Yes, of course, yes. The kids had erupted in cheers, abandoning the tire swing to run over. Mason had reached them first, throwing his arms around both of them. Lucy and Laurel had piled on, and the five of them had ended up in a heap on the grass, laughing and crying and holding on to each other like they'd never let go. Does this mean you're really my dad now? Lucy had asked Elias. If you want me to be. We want, Laurel had confirmed. We've wanted since forever. And you'll be my mom? Mason had asked Victoria. Like officially? If that's okay with you? It's very okay. Later, after the kids had finally gone to bed, buzzing with excitement about the wedding, Elias and Victoria had found themselves back in their usual spot in the kitchen. So, Victoria had said, admiring the ring on her finger, we're really doing this. Having second thoughts? Not even for a second. You? Not a chance. Although I should warn you, I come with baggage. PTSD, trust issues, an ex-wife in prison, and a son who thinks he should be best man. And I come with a defense contract, twin daughters with abandonment issues, a murdered schedule, and a security detail that's probably listening to this conversation. We're a mess, Elias had said fondly. We're perfect, Victoria had corrected. The wedding was planned for spring, small and intimate in the backyard where Elias had proposed. Victoria's parents flew in, complicated and awkward about their daughter marrying a man who'd been homeless less than 2 years ago, but warming up when they saw how the children orbited around Elias with absolute trust and affection. Elias's own parents had been dead for years, but some of his army buddies showed up, men who'd known him before everything fell apart and were openly emotional about seeing him this happy. Sarah had sent a card from her halfway house where she was completing her probation. It said simply, "Thank you for being the father Mason deserves, and thank you for letting me be part of his life again, even after everything. I hope you find all the happiness I couldn't give you." The night before the wedding, Elias had gathered all 3 kids in the living room for a conversation he'd been planning for weeks. "Tomorrow," he'd said, "your mom and I are getting married, and that means we're officially becoming a family. But I want you all to know something important. Mason, you're my son, and you always will be. Lucy, Laurel, Laurel, I'm not trying to replace your biological father or be something I'm not. But if you want to call me Dad, I'd be honored. And if you want to keep calling me Elias, that's okay too." "Can we call you Dad?" Lucy had asked, her voice small. "Please," Elias had said. "I'd love that." "And can I keep calling Mom Mom?" Mason had asked Victoria. "Even though she's not my real mom?" "Mason, I am your real mom," Victoria had said firmly. "Biology doesn't make someone a parent. Love does. Showing up does. And I show up for you every single day. So yes, I'm absolutely your real mom." The kids had piled onto the couch with them then, and they'd stayed up too late talking about tomorrow, about what it meant to be a family, about how love didn't divide. It multiplied. The wedding day dawned clear and perfect. Victoria wore a simple ivory dress. Elias wore his dress military uniform, the medals he'd earned restored to him along with his honor. Mason stood as best man with Laurel and Lucy as flower girls, all 3 of them taking their roles very seriously. The ceremony was officiated by Judge Margaret Chen, the woman who'd vacated Elias's conviction, who'd become something of a family friend. She spoke about second chances and choosing family and the courage it took to trust again after betrayal. When it came time for vows, Victoria went first. "Elias, you saved my daughters when the world stood by and watched, but more than that, you saved me. You showed me what integrity looks like, what strength really means. You taught my girls that heroes exist and that good men aren't myths. You gave Mason back his father and gave me a partner I didn't know I was missing. I promise to stand beside you through every challenge, to celebrate every victory, and to build a life with you that honors the journey that brought us together. Elias's turn was harder. His voice broke twice, but he pushed through. Victoria, a year and a half ago, I was sleeping under a bridge, convinced my life was over. I thought I'd lost everything that mattered. But then two little girls screamed for help, and suddenly I had purpose again. And you gave me more than purpose. You gave me back my son, my name, my future. You took a broken man and said, "You're not broken, you're healing." You loved me before I remembered how to love myself. And now I get to spend the rest of my life proving I was worth the faith you had in me. I promise to be the father your daughters deserve, the husband you need, and the man who never stops fighting for this family. There wasn't a dry eye in the gathering. Judge Chen pronounced them married, and when Elias kissed his bride, their 3 children cheered so loudly that the neighbors probably heard. The reception was simple. Catered food, a playlist of music the kids had helped choose, dancing in the backyard as the sun set. At one point, Elias found himself standing with Victoria, watching Mason teach the twins how to do some complicated dance move they'd probably learned on TikTok. "We did it," Victoria said, leaning into his side. "We did it," Elias agreed. "Built a family from wreckage." The best things sometimes come from the worst moments. Do you think they'll remember, Mason and the twins? Will they remember how we all came together? I hope so. Not the trauma, I hope that fades. But the love that came after, the family we chose, I hope they remember that forever. As the evening wound down and the kids started yawning, the adults began cleaning up. Marcus Stone, who'd been security but had also become friend, approached Elias with a rare smile. "You did good, Ward. Really good." "Thanks, Marcus, for everything. You've been there since the beginning." "I'm just doing my job." "It's more than that. You've been family too." Marcus's expression softened. "Well, someone's got to keep you all out of trouble." As guests departed and the children were finally herded toward bed, Lucy and Laurel to their room, Mason to his, they all insisted on one last family moment. "Group hug," Mason declared. The 5 of them stood in the hallway, wrapped around each other, and Elias felt a peace he'd never imagined possible. This was his family, his wife, his children, his home. "I love you guys," he said. "We love you too, Dad," came the chorus from 3 young voices. Victoria squeezed his hand. "Welcome home, Elias. Finally, completely home." And he was. The honeymoon was a weekend trip to a cabin in the mountains, just the 5 of them. Victoria had wanted something extravagant, Paris maybe, or the Caribbean, but Elias had suggested something simpler, something that didn't require passports or long flights, or leaving the kids behind with sitters when they'd only just officially become a family. "I want our first memory as the Ward Hale family to include all of us," he'd said, "not just the 2 of us somewhere exotic while the kids wonder if we're coming back." Victoria had understood immediately. The twins still had occasional abandonment anxiety. Mason still sometimes woke up checking to make sure his father was really there. This wasn't the time for grand gestures. This was the time for presence. So they'd rented a cabin 3 hours north, surrounded by pine trees and a lake so clear you could see straight to the bottom. The kids had their own loft bedroom with bunk beds they'd fought over until deciding to all sleep in the same bed anyway. Elias and Victoria had the master bedroom with a view of the water and morning light that filtered through the trees like something from a painting. The first morning, Elias woke to find Victoria already awake, watching him with a soft expression. "What?" he asked, his voice rough with sleep. "Nothing. Just thinking about how different everything is now. 2 years ago, I was a single mom terrified I was failing my daughters. You were sleeping under a bridge, and now look at us. Now we're a family waking up in a cabin in the woods. Life is weird." "Life is wonderful," Victoria corrected, leaning over to kiss him, "and I'm grateful for every strange twist that brought us here." Their moment was interrupted by the thunder of small feet on the stairs and Mason bursting into the room without knocking. "Dad! Victoria! Lucy says there might be bears." "Can we go look for bears, please? We'll be super careful." "No one is looking for bears," Victoria said firmly, but she was smiling. "How about we look for fish instead? There's a dock with fishing poles." "Can I help?" Laurel appeared behind her brother, already dressed and ready despite it being barely 7 in the morning. Everyone can help, Elias said, hauling himself out of bed. Give us 10 minutes to get ready. The weekend unfolded in a series of small, perfect moments. Teaching the kids to bait hooks even though Lucy refused to touch the worms and insisted on using hot dog pieces instead. Mason actually catching a fish, a small bass that they photographed extensively before releasing. The twins finding a family of ducks and spending an hour watching the ducklings follow their mother across the lake. That evening, they built a campfire and roasted marshmallows. Mason, in the way of children who'd learned to seize joy whenever it appeared, declared it the best night of his life. Lucy and Laurel echoed the sentiment, their faces sticky with melted chocolate from s'mores. Can we live here forever? Laurel asked, leaning against Elias's shoulder. We have to go back eventually, Victoria said. You have school. Dad and I have work. But we can come back, make this a tradition. Every year? Lucy asked hopefully. Every year, Elias confirmed. The Ward Hale family annual cabin trip. We'll put it on the calendar. As the fire died down and the stars emerged in a sky unpolluted by city lights, the children drifted off one by one. Mason first, his head in Victoria's lap. Then Lucy, curled against Elias's other side. Laurel held out the longest fighting sleep like it was an enemy, until finally her eyes closed and her breathing evened out. We should get them inside, Victoria whispered. In a minute, Elias said. Let's just stay like this a little longer. They sat in the darkness, their children sleeping peacefully around them, and Elias felt something he thought was lost forever, absolute contentment. Not happiness, which could be fleeting, but deep bone-level contentment with exactly where he was and who he was with. What are you thinking? Victoria asked quietly. I'm thinking about that night in the rain, when I saw those men dragging your daughters into that van. I was so tired, Victoria, tired of being cold and hungry and forgotten. Part of me wanted to just close my eyes and let someone else deal with it, let someone else be the hero. But you didn't. No, because I kept thinking about Mason, about what I'd want someone to do if it was him. And I realized that I could either be the kind of man who acts when it matters, or I could be the kind who tells himself it's not his problem. And I'd already lost everything. The only thing I had left was my character, my choice about who I wanted to be. Victoria was quiet for a moment. You know what I think about? I think about all those people who just watched, who saw my babies being taken and did nothing. And I think about how easily you could have been one of them. You had every reason to be. You'd been beaten down by life. You had nothing to gain and everything to lose. But you ran toward danger anyway. I'm not special, Elias said, the same protest he always made when people called him a hero. Yes, you are. Because most people aren't willing to sacrifice themselves for strangers. Most people choose safety over conscience. You chose differently, and because you did, we're here. All of us. Together. Elias looked down at the 3 children sleeping around them. You think they know how loved they are? I think they're learning. Every day, with every moment we show up for them, they learn that they're safe and loved, and that family isn't about biology. It's about choice. We chose each other, all 5 of us. They eventually carried the children inside, each kid barely stirring as they were tucked into beds. Elias and Victoria stood in the doorway of the loft bedroom, watching them sleep. 3 kids, Elias mused. 2 years ago, I had 1 son I couldn't see. Now I have 3 children sleeping under my roof. Our roof, Victoria corrected. And yes, we have 3 incredible kids who somehow found each other in the middle of tragedy. Do you ever think about having more? Victoria turned to look at him, surprised. More kids? Maybe? I don't know. I'm just thinking out loud. Mason's always wanted siblings. The twins seem happy to have him. But I also don't want to assume anything or pressure you or... Victoria stopped him with a kiss. Let's get through the first year of marriage before we discuss expanding our family further. But Elias? I'm not opposed to the idea. Someday. Someday works for me. They returned to the city on Sunday evening, all 5 of them sunburned and happy and smelling vaguely of campfire smoke. The house felt welcoming in a way it never quite had before Elias and Mason had moved in, like it had been waiting for all of them to make it complete. The weeks that followed settled into a new rhythm. Elias and Victoria wore their wedding rings with quiet pride. The kids told everyone at school about the wedding, about their new family configuration, about how they were basically siblings now. Some of the other parents looked at their blended family with skepticism or curiosity, but most were simply kind. One evening, about a month after the wedding, Victoria came home from work looking troubled. Elias found her in their bedroom now, shared, their clothes mingling in the closet, their lives intertwined in every way, staring at her laptop. "Everything okay?" he asked. "I got an email from Marcus Webb's lawyer." Elias's entire body tensed. "What does he want?" "Webb wants to meet with us, both of us. He's claiming he has information about other corruption cases, other people he worked with, names of officials he bribed. He's offering to cooperate in exchange for, I don't know what. The email doesn't specify." "It's a trap," Elias said immediately. "He's trying to manipulate us somehow." "That's what I thought too. But Jennifer thinks we should at least hear what he has to say. She says if he really does have information about other corrupt officials, it could help a lot of people like you who've been wrongfully convicted." Elias sat on the edge of the bed. The idea of seeing Marcus Webb again, of being in the same room as the man who'd stolen years of his life, made his skin crawl. But Victoria was right. If Webb had information that could help other innocent people. "Okay," he said finally, "but we do it on our terms. Federal facility, prosecutors present, full security. And if at any point it feels wrong, we walk out." Agreed. The meeting was scheduled for 2 weeks later at the Federal Detention Center where Webb was being held. Jennifer Krause met them outside, along with Marcus Stone and 2 federal prosecutors who'd been working on additional cases potentially connected to Webb's criminal network. "Remember," Jennifer said as they went through security, "you don't have to do this. You don't owe him anything. If you want to turn around right now, we can." "We're here," Victoria said firmly. "Let's get this over with." They were led to a secure meeting room. Webb was already there, seated at a metal table, his hands cuffed, looking far more diminished than Elias remembered. Prison had not been kind to him. His hair was thinner, grayer. His expensive confidence had been replaced with something that looked almost like desperation. When Webb saw them, something flickered across his face. Regret? Fear? Elias couldn't tell and didn't particularly care. "Thank you for coming," Webb said, his voice hoarse. "We didn't come for you," Elias said coldly. "We came because if you actually have information that can help other people, we want to hear it." Webb nodded slowly. "I deserve that. I deserve your hatred, both of you." He looked at Victoria. "I tried to have your children trafficked. There's no excuse for that. No apology sufficient." "No, there isn't," Victoria said, her voice ice. "So don't insult us by trying." "I won't." Webb took a shaky breath. "I've had a lot of time to think in here, about the choices I made, the people I hurt, and I realize that the only thing I can do, the only remotely redemptive action left to me, is to try to stop other people like me from destroying more lives." One of the prosecutors leaned forward. "Mr. Webb, you indicated you have information about a broader network of corruption." "I do. Names, documentation, accounts. There are at least 6 other federal judges who've taken bribes to influence cases, dozens of prosecutors who've suppressed evidence, military officials who've been running theft operations like mine for years. I kept records. Insurance, I thought. But now," he looked directly at Elias, "now I want to give them to you, all of them, every piece of evidence I have about every corrupt official I know." "Why?" Elias asked flatly. "Why would you help us?" "Because I can't undo what I did. I can't give you back the time I stole. I can't erase the trauma I caused your family, Victoria. But I can maybe prevent it from happening to other people. Maybe that counts for something. Maybe it doesn't. But it's all I have left." The prosecutors exchanged glances. "Mr. Webb, are you offering this information in exchange for a reduced sentence?" "No," Webb said, and he sounded sincere. "I'm not asking for anything. I'm 45 years old. I'll be 90 before I'm eligible for parole, assuming I live that long. I'm going to die in here. I know that. Accept it. This isn't a negotiation. It's an offering. A way to maybe salvage something decent from the wreckage I made of my life. Elias studied the man who'd been his enemy for so long, looking for the lie, the angle, the manipulation, but all he saw was a broken man who'd finally understood the magnitude of his crimes. You really have evidence that could overturn other wrongful convictions? Elias asked. At least a dozen that I know of. Maybe more. People like you, Elias. Good people who got in the way and got crushed by the system I corrupted. Victoria stood abruptly. I need a minute. She walked out of the room, and after a moment Elias followed. He found her in the hallway, her back against the wall, breathing hard. I want to believe him, she said. I want to believe that people can change, that even someone like Webb can do something good. But Victoria, he tried to have our daughter sold. How do I reconcile that with suddenly trusting anything he says? You don't have to trust him, Elias said gently. The prosecutors will verify everything he provides. If the evidence is real, it doesn't matter whether his motives are pure. Other people will be freed. Other families will be reunited. That's what matters. I hate that he gets to be part of something good. I hate that he gets any kind of redemption. Then don't think of it as redemption. Think of it as him finally being useful for something other than destruction. Victoria looked at her husband with eyes full of pain and confusion and love. How are you so calm about this? He destroyed your life. He tried to, Elias corrected. But he failed. I have my son. I have you and the girls. I have my name and my freedom and a future I couldn't have imagined 2 years ago. Webb is dying in prison. I'm living the best life I've ever known. He didn't win. We did. They stood in silence for a moment, Victoria processing, Elias waiting patiently. Okay, she said finally, let's hear what he has. Not for him. For the people who are still suffering. They returned to the meeting room. Over the next 2 hours, Webb detailed his network of corruption with meticulous precision. Names, dates, bank accounts, email servers, encrypted communications. The prosecutors took notes rapidly, occasionally asking for clarification. Why did you keep all of this? One of the prosecutors asked. Most criminals try to destroy evidence. Insurance, Webb said again. Leverage. If anyone ever turned on me, I could bring them down too. Mutually assured destruction. He laughed bitterly. Turns out it didn't save me. But maybe it can save someone else. As the meeting concluded, Webb looked at Elias one more time. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I need you to know that what I did to you, framing you, destroying your life, it haunts me. Every day. I see your son's face in my nightmares. I hear him asking why his daddy left. That's my hell, Elias, knowing I did that to an innocent child. Elias stood, preparing to leave. At the door, he turned back. Marcus, I'm not going to tell you you're forgiven because I'm not there yet. Maybe I'll never be there. But I will tell you this. If your information really does help other people, if it stops other families from being torn apart the way mine was, then maybe your life will have meant something after all. Not redemption, but something. Webb nodded, tears tracking down his face. Thank you. That's more than I deserve. Outside in the parking lot, Victoria pulled Elias into a fierce hug. That was hard. For both of us. Yeah, but it was the right thing to do. You're a better person than I am. I wanted to hurt him. Even now, even knowing he's dying in prison, part of me wanted him to suffer more. That doesn't make you a bad person, Victoria. That makes you a mother whose children were threatened. Your anger is justified. But you're not angry. Not anymore. Elias considered that. I'm not angry because anger kept me alive when I had nothing else. But now I have everything. I have you and Mason and Lucy and Laurel and a home and a future. Anger would just poison that. So I'm choosing to let it go. Not for Webb, for me. For us. The drive home was quiet, both of them lost in thought. When they arrived, the kids were in the living room with the babysitter, playing some elaborate game involving pillows and blankets and apparently a dragon that had to be defeated with kindness rather than swords. Mom, Dad! Mason shouted when he saw them. You're home! Did you defeat the bad guy? Something like that, Elias said, scooping his son into a hug. But more importantly, did you defeat the dragon? We convinced him to be our friend instead, Lucy explained. Violence isn't always the answer. Victoria caught Elias's eye over the children's heads and smiled, out of the mouths of babes. That night, after the kids were in bed, Elias and Victoria sat in their favorite spot in the kitchen, decompressing over tea instead of coffee because it was late and they were both exhausted. Jennifer called while you were doing bedtime, Victoria said. The prosecutors confirmed that Webb's information is legitimate. They're already starting the process of reviewing the cases he identified. She thinks at least 8 wrongful convictions will be overturned within the year. 8 families getting what we got, Elias said softly. 8 people getting their lives back. Because of us. Because we were willing to sit in that room and listen to the man who tried to destroy us. Because you were willing to set aside your very justified desire for revenge in favor of helping strangers. Victoria smiled tiredly. We make a good team, don't we? The best team. The months that followed brought unexpected developments. The case Webb had provided evidence for began unraveling rapidly. Federal judges were arrested, prosecutors were disbarred, military officials faced courts-martial, and slowly, one by one, wrongfully convicted people began having their cases reviewed and overturned. Elias and Victoria watched from a distance, not seeking recognition, but quietly satisfied that something good had come from their pain. Jennifer kept them updated, sending occasional notes about families reunited, lives restored, justice finally served. One day, about 4 months after the meeting with Webb, a man appeared at their door. He was in his 30s, wearing a suit that looked new, his eyes red-rimmed but his smile genuine. Mr. Ward, Mrs. Ward-Hale, my name is David Chen. I'm not sure if you remember me, but I testified against you, Mr. Ward, at your trial. I lied. I said you were part of the theft ring when you weren't. Elias remembered. Yes. This was one of the soldiers Webb had paid to provide false testimony. I know who you are, Elias said carefully. What can I do for you? I just wanted to tell you I'm sorry. In person. Webb paid me $50,000 to destroy your life, and I took it because I was scared and weak, and I convinced myself you probably deserved it somehow. But you didn't. And I've lived with that guilt every day since. David, you don't need to... Yes, I do. I need to say this. I just had my conviction overturned, thanks to the evidence you and Mrs. Hale helped provide from Webb. They arrested the judge who convicted me. Same pattern as your case. Fabricated evidence, bribed testimony. I've been in prison for 3 years for a crime I didn't commit, and I know that's because of karma, because of what I did to you. But Mrs. Hale's lawyers reached out. They're helping me, filing a wrongful conviction suit, getting me compensation. Tears were streaming down his face now. You could have let me rot. You could have said I deserved what I got, but you didn't. You helped free me anyway, and I needed you to know that I see that. I see the kind of person you are, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be that kind of person too. Victoria appeared behind Elias in the doorway. David, do you have family? People waiting for you? A wife and a daughter. She's 5 now. I missed 2 years of her life. Then go home to them, Victoria said gently. Be the father she deserves. That's how you pay this forward. Not through apologies, but through action. David nodded, wiping his eyes. Thank you, both of you, for being better than I was. After he left, Elias and Victoria stood in the doorway, watching him walk to his car. That's the 3rd person who's come to apologize, Victoria noted. Do you think they'll all come eventually? Everyone who participated in your conviction? I don't know. And honestly, I don't need them to. Their apologies don't change the past. But if our pain helped them find their way to something better, then maybe it means something. The first anniversary of their wedding approached with surprising speed. Mason was thriving in school, making friends, occasionally mentioning his biological mother without pain. Sarah had started her supervised visits, and while they were awkward, they were civil. The twins had mostly moved past their trauma, though they still had occasional nightmares and clung a little tighter during thunderstorms. For their anniversary, Elias and Victoria decided to return to the cabin where they'd spent their honeymoon. Same place, same faces, same 5 people who'd become a family. On the drive up, Mason asked from the back seat, Dad, Do you ever think about what would have happened if you didn't save Lucy and Laurel? Sometimes, Elias admitted. Why do you ask? Because everything good that happened started that night. If you hadn't been there, if you hadn't helped them, we wouldn't be a family. Lucy and Laurel would be gone. And you'd still be homeless, and I'd still be with Mom, and we'd all be apart. That's dark, kiddo, Lucy said from beside him. But it's true, Laurel added. That one moment changed everything for all of us. Victoria glanced at Elias, and he knew they were both thinking the same thing. That night in the rain had been terrible and beautiful in equal measure. Terrible in what it represented. Children in danger, a world that watched without helping, the desperation that had driven Elias to risk his life. Beautiful in what it had created, this family, this love, this second chance for all of them. I think about it differently, Victoria said, turning to address the kids in the back seat. I think that night revealed who your dad really is. Not a hero who suddenly appeared, but a good man who'd been there all along. He didn't save Lucy and Laurel because he wanted something in return. He did it because that's who he is. Someone who helps when help is needed. And that would have been true whether I'd been there to reward him or not. So we didn't make him good, Mason said, understanding. He already was good. Exactly. At the cabin, they fell into familiar routines from their honeymoon trip. Fishing off the dock, building fires, roasting marshmallows. But this time, there was an ease to it all. A comfort that came from repetition and love and the certainty that this was their place, their tradition, their family moment carved out from the chaos of normal life. On their actual anniversary night, after the kids were asleep in the loft, Elias and Victoria sat by the fire outside. The stars were brilliant overhead, and the lake reflected moonlight like scattered diamonds. 1 year, Victoria said, her head on Elias's shoulder. 1 year of marriage. 2 years since that night. Best 2 years of my life, Elias said, even counting the parts that were hard. Do you have any regrets? Not a single one. You? Only that I didn't meet you sooner. That we had to go through all that pain to find each other. Maybe we needed the pain, Elias mused. Maybe we had to be broken separately before we could fit together properly. That's very philosophical for someone who claims he's not a deep thinker. I've had a lot of time to think over the last 2 years, about choices and consequences, about how the worst moments can lead to the best outcomes if you're willing to keep fighting through them. Victoria lifted her head to look at him. Elias, I need to tell you something. His heart skipped. Okay, I'm pregnant. Time seemed to stop. Elias stared at her, his brain trying to process the words. We're having a baby? We're having a baby, Victoria confirmed, tears starting. I found out yesterday. I wanted to tell you here, at this place that means so much to us. Elias pulled her into his arms, his own eyes burning. A baby. Our baby. The biological connection between us. The fourth child in our family of 5, about to be 6. How do you feel? Terrified. Excited. Overwhelmed. Happy. All of it at once. Me too. Elias pulled back to cup her face in his hands. Victoria, I love you. I love our family. I love that we're adding to it. This is everything. They sat by the fire for hours, talking about the future, about how to tell the kids, about logistics and preparations, and all the practical considerations of adding an infant to their already chaotic household. But mostly, they just held each other and marveled at how far they'd come. The next morning, they gathered the kids on the dock for a family meeting. So, Victoria began, Dad and I have some news, and we wanted to share it with you 3 first because you're the most important people in our lives. All 3 kids immediately looked worried. Is someone sick? Lucy asked. Is Dad leaving? Mason added, his old fear surfacing. No, nothing bad, Elias assured quickly. This is good news. Really good news. We're going to have a baby, Victoria said simply. You 3 are going to have a little brother or sister. The silence lasted approximately 3 seconds before all 3 kids erupted into chaos. A baby? Really? A real baby? Can we name it? Can I teach it things? When does it come? Will it be a boy or a girl? Can we build it a special room? The questions tumbled over each other. Elias and Victoria fielded them as best they could, laughing at the enthusiasm, reassuring them that nothing would change except their family getting bigger and even better. This baby is so lucky, Laurel said eventually, after the initial excitement had calmed. It gets to be born into a family that actually loves each other. Not all babies get that. The wisdom of that statement, coming from an 8-year-old who'd learned too young how fragile safety could be, made both adults tear up. You're right, Elias said. This baby will know from day one that it's wanted and loved and protected. Just like all of you, just like this whole family. Mason looked thoughtful. So this baby is like proof that everything worked out, that all the bad stuff led to something good. I guess it is, Victoria said softly. This baby is our future, built on everything we survived to get here. The pregnancy progressed normally, though Victoria's work schedule had to be adjusted and the house underwent renovations to convert the guest room into a nursery. The kids took their new roles as older siblings seriously. Mason read books about being a big brother. Lucy and Laurel discussed whether they wanted a sister or a brother with the gravity of people making world-changing decisions. During this time, Marcus Webb's health declined. Jennifer Krause kept them updated. Stage 4 cancer, apparently, undiagnosed until it was too late. He had maybe 6 months, the doctors said. Webb sent one final message through his lawyers. It was brief, simple, and somehow more impactful than any long apology could have been. Thank you for showing me what real strength looks like, what it means to turn pain into purpose. I'm dying knowing I destroyed lives, but also knowing that in my last months, I helped save some. That's because of you, both of you. Thank you for being better than I ever was. And congratulations on your family. Your children are lucky to have you. He died 3 weeks later. Elias and Victoria didn't attend any service. They weren't sure there was one, but they acknowledged his passing in their own way. I hope he found some peace at the end, Victoria said. I hope the people he hurt find more, Elias replied. Victoria gave birth on a spring morning in a hospital room surrounded by family. Elias was there, of course, holding her hand and whispering encouragement. The kids waited with Victoria's parents in the family lounge, too excited to sit still. When the baby finally arrived, a healthy girl with a shock of dark hair and lungs that announced her presence with impressive volume, the nurse cleaned her and handed her to Victoria. She's perfect, Victoria breathed, tears streaming down her face. She's ours, Elias said, his voice breaking. Completely, biologically, undeniably ours. They named her Hope. Hope Grace Ward Hale. Because hope was what had carried them through everything. Hope was what had kept Elias alive under that bridge. Hope was what had made Victoria believe justice could prevail. Hope was the foundation of everything they'd built. When the kids were finally allowed in to meet their new sister, they approached with a mixture of excitement and awe. She's so tiny, Mason whispered, gently touching Hope's hand. Her fingers wrapped around his and his face lit up. She's holding my hand. That's because you're her big brother, Elias said. She already knows you're going to protect her. Lucy and Laurel took turns holding the baby, both of them crying happy tears, both of them declaring her the most beautiful thing they'd ever seen. We're really sisters now, Lucy said to Laurel. Not just because of the kidnapping or because our parents got married, but because we share a sister. That makes us connected forever. We were already connected forever, Laurel corrected. But yeah, this makes it extra official. That night, after visiting hours ended and it was just Elias, Victoria, and baby Hope in the quiet hospital room, they sat together in the semi-darkness, watching their daughter sleep. 2 years ago, Victoria said softly, I thought my family was destroyed. I thought men like Webb won. I thought the world was too dark for light to survive. And now, Elias prompted, now I know that darkness exists, but I also know that people like you exist, people who run toward danger, people who choose goodness even when it costs them everything. And I know that from the worst moments, if you fight hard enough, something beautiful can emerge. Elias kissed his wife's temple, then leaned down to press a gentle kiss to Hope's forehead. She's going to grow up hearing the story of how our family came together, how her older siblings survived trauma and found each other, how her parents lost everything and built it back stronger. She's going to grow up knowing that heroes are real, Victoria added, and that her father is one of them. I'm not. Yes, you are, Victoria interrupted firmly. Stop arguing with me about it. You're a hero to those twins you saved, to the son you never stopped fighting for, to all the people whose convictions were overturned because you were willing to face your enemy and do the right thing. And you're a hero to me, my hero, the man who proved that good people really do exist. Elias didn't argue further. He just held his wife and daughter and let himself feel the magnitude of the journey that had brought them here. The weeks after bringing Hope home were predictably chaotic. 3 older kids adjusting to an infant sibling, sleep deprivation, the normal challenges of a newborn. But threaded through all of it was joy, pure, uncomplicated joy that came from watching their family expand and grow. Mason was the most attentive big brother, always volunteering to help with diaper changes or bottle feedings. Lucy loved singing to Hope, discovering that the baby would stop crying when she heard her sister's voice. Laurel appointed herself the official Hope photographer, documenting every tiny milestone with Victoria's phone. On Hope's 3-month birthday, the whole family gathered in the backyard for an impromptu picnic. The weather was perfect, warm but not hot, with a breeze that carried the scent of the roses Victoria had planted after the wedding. Hope lay on a blanket, watching the clouds drift past, occasionally making sounds that might have been words or might have been random baby noises but delighted everyone regardless. She's going to be talking soon, Mason predicted, and walking, and then we can teach her to play catch and build Lego spaceships. She needs to learn to sit up first, Lucy pointed out practically. Details, Mason said with a wave of his hand. Elias and Victoria sat slightly apart from the kids, giving them space to bond with their baby sister while also keeping watchful eyes on the chaos. This is it, Victoria said suddenly. This is the life I was fighting for, not just survival, not just safety, but this, family, love, normal moments that feel extraordinary because of how close we came to losing everything. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, Elias admitted, for something to go wrong, for someone to take it all away again. Nothing's going to take this away, Victoria said firmly. We built this, we fought for it, and we're going to protect it with everything we have. Promise? Promise. As the afternoon wore into evening, as the kids played and Hope drifted in and out of sleep, and the world turned in its endless rotation, Elias found himself thinking about that night 2 years ago, about rain and screams and the moment he'd chosen to stand up instead of staying invisible, about how one choice, one moment of choosing action over apathy, had cascaded into everything he now held dear. Later, after the kids were in bed and Hope was sleeping in her bassinet beside their bed, Elias stood at the window looking out over the backyard. Victoria joined him, slipping her arms around his waist from behind. What are you thinking about? She asked. I'm thinking about all the people who watched that night, who saw your daughters being taken and chose not to help. And I'm wondering what their lives look like now. If they think about it, if they regret their inaction. Does it matter? I guess not. But I hope they learned something. I hope they understand that sometimes the most important thing you can do is simply refuse to be a bystander. You taught our kids that lesson, Victoria said. All 4 of them are growing up knowing that you help people even when it's hard, even when it costs you. That's a legacy, Elias. That's how you change the world, one child at a time, teaching them that character matters more than comfort. Elias turned to face his wife, this woman who'd saved him just as surely as he'd saved her daughters. I love you, Victoria Ward-Hale. I love you too, Elias Ward-Hale. They stood together in the darkness, listening to their baby breathe, knowing that 3 other children slept safely down the hall, and felt the weight of gratitude for lives that had been broken and remade into something stronger. Because sometimes, Elias thought, the greatest miracles don't look like miracles at first. Sometimes they look like tragedy, like loss, like everything falling apart. But if you survive long enough, if you choose goodness even in darkness, if you run toward danger instead of away, sometimes you find that the broken pieces can be reassembled into something more beautiful than what existed before. He'd been a soldier who lost everything. She'd been a mother watching her children disappear into a nightmare, and together they'd become a family. Not despite their pain, but because of what they'd learned from it. Not in spite of their scars, but because those scars had taught them the value of gentleness, of fighting for what matters. of never taking love for granted. And in the end, that was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The storm that had nearly destroyed both their lives had passed, and in its wake, it left not devastation but possibility. Not endings but beginnings. Not separation but the deepest kind of connection. The kind that's forged in fire and tested by time and proven unbreakable by everything the world throws at it. They'd found each other in darkness. They'd built a family from ruins. And every day forward was a victory. A testament to the truth that sometimes the greatest heroes aren't the ones in uniforms or headlines. They're the ones who show up, who choose kindness when cruelty is easier, who run toward screaming children when everyone else freezes. They're the ones who prove again and again that even in a world that can be unspeakably cruel, love still wins. Family still matters. And hope, always, always hope, survives. Elias held his wife close, their baby sleeping nearby, their children dreaming peacefully down the hall, and knew with absolute certainty that he was exactly where he was supposed to be. That every moment of suffering had been worth it to arrive at this place, that he would do it all again, endure it all again, for the privilege of this life, this love, this family. Thank you, he whispered into Victoria's hair, for everything, for believing in me, for fighting for me, for giving me this. Thank you for being someone worth believing in, she whispered back, for showing my daughters what goodness looks like, for being the father Mason needed, for loving all of us so completely. They stood together in the quiet house that had become their home, surrounded by the evidence of their victory over darkness, and let themselves simply be grateful. For second chances, for courage that shows up when needed most, for children who teach you about resilience, for love that heals what was broken, and for the simple, profound truth that sometimes the most heroic thing you can do is refuse to walk away, refuse to ignore suffering, refuse to accept that evil wins. Sometimes heroism looks like running into rain toward screaming children. Sometimes it looks like fighting for justice, even when the system is rigged. Sometimes it looks like building a family from strangers who choose to love each other. And sometimes it looks like standing in a quiet room, holding the person who makes you believe in tomorrow, and whispering thank you to the universe for the long, hard road that led you home. This was their story, their family, their victory, and it was everything.